You're audible. Ketanji, let us
Yes,
go
sir.
ahead. All the
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. Very good afternoon to all esteemed guests and participants. On behalf of Office of International Affairs, the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda, and Department of Business Economics, Faculty of Commerce,
thought of organizing webinar on lending a business through economic crisis. It is both. You have to lend and you have to lead. So that I have used very deliberately. Let me appreciate the support that we have received in today's webinar. From distinguished speaker, we welcome Professor Khan from University Department of Financial Mathematics from Germany. I appreciate the presence of Dr. Tuomo, who is the President and CEO from Finland. Dr. Chakravarti who joined us timely today. Again, a founder CEO from Mauritius. Dr. Anidya Chakravarti from a very prestigious institute of very prestigious management institute, Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. Along with him, his colleague Dr. Ankur Sinha, who is also from IIM Ahmedabad. And I'm sure we are also having with us today Director of Research, again Financial Mathematics from UK, Professor Paresh Dante. Along with my team of research scholars, attendees across the country. I think let's look at these topic. I wish I would like to provide you a level playing field so that experts can certainly share their experiences. Let us remember, when we talk about leading businesses through this economic crisis, I would like to relate it specifically with the Indian economy. And let's recognize that the economy, which has fought survival very, very hard under the COVID-19. And now I think we are on the path of revival. And I would say that within couple of months, I say once again, if you look at the business reports, let me again bring to your notice, Honorable Prime Minister, after interaction with all the chief ministers of all the states of the country, he in fact concluded with a very, very positive note that there are green shoots, there are green signals, and I think Indian economy has already started moving on the right track. We are heading towards what we call it as normal or new normal, transformational normal, or probably we are entering into what we call it as new economic world order. India is today, as you all know, it has been recognized as the 5th largest economy in terms of nominal GDP. US leads at $21 trillion, followed by China at $15 trillion, Japan at $5, and Germany at $3.86. India stands at $2.96 trillion. And I think we have aspirations to climb ladder by 2022, and now I think we would like to do that maybe in 2025. When you look at this ranking of these top 5 economy of the world, I would say that the government of India first of all decided that we would respond first to the health sector. That is very, very important. The first challenge that the government of India took, that we would like to fight the COVID to save the lives of people, and then the livelihood, that is the social front. And now I think with the support of the what we call it as economic stimulus, one of its big size, though we really need some more support. I'm sure and confident that would happen in near future, but with the support of 20 lakh crore that has come to support to revive the economic front and the business activities. As you all know, in the G20 economies, India is the 5th largest economy in terms of offering relief and stimulus package. As I told you, which if we translate of these 20 lakh crore, it would reach to around $265 billion, around 10% of the GDP. Dr. Jayant Kumar made an attempt to touch this in his introductory outline of this webinar. We lead, Japan of course leads with the 21% of GDP, around 1.1 trillion. US has got 2.7 trillion with 13.3% of its GDP. Australia is around 10.8%. Germany is around 10.7%. But I think government of India has decided its strategy, to go gradually in order to provide these support. And as you all know, the challenge before all of us is to create Atmanirbhar Bharat, which Honorable Prime Minister said, based on 5 pillars that you all know: economy, infrastructure, system which is supported with technology, then we have a vibrant demography, and above all, demand. The challenge before all of us, because if you are if you are leading businesses through economic crisis, I would say that yes, Government of India has put in some efforts to strengthen the supply side. Now the challenge that I understand, I'm sure experts would deliberate on, that the businesses, the corporates, I think belonging to all sectors, will have to do needful to ensure that how can we generate demand, how can we again bring back the consumer consumption led economic growth for this country. Let me just give you a reference of these what we call crisis which we are facing. And as I told you, is that there are three options. Various several reports have also brought out, because when we talk about leading businesses through economic crisis, and I'm trying to relate my address, especially with the Indian economy, I would say that how can we manage this epidemic and resultant public health crisis. I think I would not go into detailed discussion, but you just imagine the kind of health infrastructure which we had before a couple of months back. And I think we have put in all out efforts to see to it that I would say that the country of ours exported medicines to 123 countries. Now that is our response to the health crisis that the world and the economy is facing. Effort has been put in to augment financial resources, increasing insurance coverage. And I think we are looking at technology, information technology, precisely as the solution of all problems that we're facing in almost all sectors. Even you can see this webinar which is happening on an online platform, where I'm very happy we have experts across the world. They are with us now. That is how the Indians, they have learned to adapt and adopt and fine tune with the smart use of technology. The second is protecting income and employment. I think the big challenge that we are facing, particularly for the more vulnerable sections of the society, through implementing, I think, of course, the size of this country, if you look at it, is of course not sufficient. But then I appreciate the efforts by implementing the direct cash transfer program, which has been backed up by adequate monitoring and evaluation mechanism. I think now we realize the importance of the Jan Dhan Yojana, with the Government of India successfully implemented at the national level. And I think now I come to the theme of the webinar: supporting the corporate sector, because that's very important to minimize adverse economic impact and to facilitate quick recovery through immediate measures. Now, I would not go into detailed discussion, but the credit support to small scale sector, micro and small and medium enterprises, to even medium and long term measures, like Government of India has put in efforts, very focused efforts on building infrastructure and undertaking policies that would certainly help us to build India, a very strong India. And I think yes, we are also focusing upon at the global level in improving and strengthening our, what we call it as, value chain and also supply chain management. Now, I think what are the key questions that we would like to ask to industry or corporate executives? What are their challenges? Let's try to spend some time on it. And I think the biggest challenge, the foremost challenge that the industry or the corporates that they are facing is that how to continue maintaining the business, and then gradually how to improve the pace of it. How to maintain the operational resilience, because the circumstances are not the same. Yes, you may be in any sector, in any part of the world, but I think the world will look as it is already started, happening, that the world will look as very, very different. So I think it is not going to be a smooth ride It is going to be a rough ride, but I think we have to be very, very optimistic with the kind of a support that we are getting from all stakeholders, society, all citizens of this country. When we come within the four walls of the organization or the corporate industry, how to infuse organizational agility in a dispersed work environment. I think the concept of remote work or working from a home, I think it's very new. But I would say that based on my little experience with interactions with a diverse group of stakeholders, I'm very happy to learn that we all have started to put in more working hours, 24 into 7. Though people in India, they work from home, but I think they're committed. They spend, in fact, relatively more time with the flexibility. They're all trying very hard to balance out their, personal front, the family front, and of course the organizational front or the formal, responsibilities which they have to discharge. Uh, One of the most important challenge, I would say, while leading businesses through this economic crisis, we are looking for solution is how to best sense, serve, and satisfy customers. That's very, very important. Be it retail, be it small and medium-sized enterprises. I think they're also under heavy influence of COVID-19. So I think this is one answer that we would be looking for. Yes, because we're working at home, and the country to which we belong to, we believe in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. We have emotional connect with our people, and then we required to work from home. We are interacting. Even as of now, I'm reaching out all of you digitally. But then, okay, we are trying to stay connected digitally. But then there is an emotional connect with which we are all together. The challenge that the industry is facing is that what more should be done to sustain employee motivation and engagement. I think this is very, very important. How we would create, build, and develop a kind of an organization culture where I would say that each one of us would put in efforts to deliver the best. We can not only just carry out the routine, but we would put our creativity and our innovativeness at the best. And I think because we are talking about businesses where we have to take a risk, we are talking about investments, we are talking about handling various challenges. Yes, the return on investment or profitability, what you call, I think is also adversely affected with the revenue growth that we look at. But I am sure, I think we are also influenced, or our return on investment or profitability is also influenced by what we call it as the low rate of interest. So there are challenges, but then there are opportunities. That's what I understand. I'm very happy. If you look at the current recent developments, almost all state government, look at all the chief ministers of various states in our country, including under able leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Bhai Modi. I think all chief ministers of our various states, including Vijay Bhai Rupani ji, they are all behaving as the CEOs of the state, not as the chief minister. They all work as what we call our Honorable Prime Minister as the sevak. They want to serve the society. They want to serve the whole world. And I'm very happy to share some of, as you all know, some of the recent developments which I think that are happening, where I would say that the bureaucrats and the government put in together, they all have started very aggressively to bring in some of the companies where we, in fact, already you find rationalization of various reforms, be it labor reforms, be it market reforms, be it reforms in financial sectors. I think all out efforts are on to bring in the companies from abroad to India, to provide them an opportunity to stabilize again and continue their economic activities with the same pace. And at the same time, you know that uh, a large size of our unorganized sector people, I would not like to use the word labor, but the skilled workmen and unskilled workmen, they have gone back to their own states. I think government of India has expanded its own schemes also to kickstart economic activities in the rural sector, also in the informal sector. I thought, let me um, provide a very balanced view, not just of businesses, because you can't think of businesses without dependence on the political system. So political system, economic system, and technological system, I am sure what it appears to me, they are working in a very, very integrated fashion. And I think the country is heading towards, a growth stage from the revival. And I'm sure whatever deliberations that would take place, whatever recommendations that would come forward from different experts, having a diverse background, I think there'll be a lot of takeaways for our attendees who are with us today in this webinar. I congratulate once again Professor Danesh Patel, Professor Vanisha, Professor Ketan Upadhyay, and entire team of the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda, and my beloved teachers, research scholars, and students, and all other attendees. I'm sure the Maharaja Sayajirao University of Baroda would continue to provide you such thought-provoking, webinars on a topic of great significance, which touches lives of each and every one of us. Before I close, let me request all those who are with me, listening to me, let us become sensible to weak people, poor people, needy people. Let us focus on self-reliance. It does not mean be Indian and buy Indian, but we need to restrict self-discipline. We need to restrict our needs and wants and see to it that whatever resources that we have, we make best use of it for the mankind. With these words, I once again extend my sincere thanks to all of you for a very patient listening. All the very best to each one of you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Your remarks have been holistic and very insightful and definitely will set the right tone for today's deliberations. We now move on to the presentations, and I hand over the session to Dr. Tomo Korane, who will be moderating the first presentation by Dr. Chiragro Chakraborty. Sir.
All right, good afternoon, everybody, and let me welcome and introduce Dr. Chiragro Chakraborty, who has a distinguished career in finance in India, in Mauritius, where he has been in charge of a $6 billion national forex reserve portfolio, and also has been an innovator in the area of financial technology. Dr. Chakraborty also has a very wide knowledge of African economies and how they are to be integrated in the modern world economy. So, Dr. Chakraborty, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kuran. Thank you so much for this. Let me upload my presentation and then I can just start it. Thank you very much for this introduction. Okay. Can everybody see my presentation? Am I audible?
Not yet. Yeah, you're audible, sir, but your presentation, yes, now it's there.
Okay, great. So, should I say good afternoon or good evening to everyone? Thank you for this invitation to speak on this very honored, very prestigious international webinar organized by the university. Thank you for introducing me for this session. I was hearing Vice Chancellor speaking about the introductory session, and he has covered quite a bit of things which is happening in India and other part of the world. So that was a really good base to begin with. So being a first speaker is sometimes so difficult because people who understand cricket will understand this, that opening batsman always starts with a very shaky start, because you don't know what type of questions and what type of things will come in front of you. But anyway, let me take this opportunity. So my topic today is basically, when I want to speak about it, we are speaking about entrepreneurship, a way forward for Atma Nirbhar. And that's a word which is being used by our Honorable Prime Minister, and which is a great word to talk about. So I'll be trying to trying to address that this session along with around that concept of Atmanirbhar. But before I go to my topic, just a small slide on what we are at Katik Consulting. This is my own financial consulting technology company.
Sir, if I may interrupt, your screen is not visible.
Not visible. It is visible now.
You need to share it again.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Not yet, sir.
Is it?
Yes, yes,
Can you see it?
yes,
Is it fine?
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Fine. Please.
Thank you very much. So I was just quickly, I'll introduce what we do in Africa, as well as we are based in Mauritius, and we do basically consulting related to finance and technology. So we do a lot of consulting related to the business process, policy, product. As I was ex-central banker and also now working with International Monetary Fund as a financial market expert. So this becomes very close to my heart to talk about policy and products, and which I'll be also sharing in my presentation a bit. We also do a lot of technology advisory, but related to financial market, financial industry. We are in big working on data management, which is, I consider data now is as valuable as gold. So a lot of quantitative work is being done on data management, and we are part of it. Research and training, that's a backbone for our consulting, because we do a lot of work on whatever consulting we do, it is backed by research and training to the client. Regulations, we work with various government in Mauritius, in Africa, as well as in Mauritius, talk about financial regulations. And finally, we will help people to set up business across Africa. So that's about Katik Consulting. I'll not waste much time on that. That just to introduce the company to all of you. And straight away, I go to my first slide, which we talk about today's topic. Before I go to the topic, I just wanted to give you some contextual comments on this Corona or COVID, or whatever we call it, as this dreadful virus, which is creating havoc across the globe. So I just wanted to share with you that this coronavirus pandemic started from January 2020. So officially it was announced as a pandemic in January 2020. And then we have seen since this figure of 467,000 plus people died because of coronavirus. So it looks a pretty big figure. But if you compare this figure with some of the other diseases of last year, this is the people died because of AIDS. This is the government source data, 770,000 plus. We see people died of malnutrition. The numbers looks pretty big. People died of malaria, still higher than coronavirus in last year. It's 575,000 plus. And still, we consider this coronavirus a big pandemic, which is being declared at 467,000. And we've seen that because of this, we are having a dire economic consequences, as well as which is leading to a very high unemployment across the globe. US is showing a big number of unemployment. UK and other places are also showing a very big number of unemployment. So yeah, that's the scenario. But the numbers of other diseases are much bigger than the corona disease, people dying of corona. But still, we are seeing a very high impact on our economy. We have also seen some social crisis looming ahead. Also, we have seen that already, and I am assuming if the unemployment rate goes in such a big way, we will see some more social crisis coming in the future. But the best part is that we still, our experts say that with soaps and detergent we can clear, we can, if we clean our hand clean, this type of virus will not come to us. So that's the best part of it. We don't so much of unemployment, so much of economic consequences in a negative sense, but if we clean our hand clean, this virus will not come. Very, very nice way to put that. And if I go back to my International Monetary Fund outlook, which came out in April 2020, and you'll be seeing the next one coming on 24th June again, that shows a huge amount of a negative growth on the world economy, and that's really scary. That we are seeing that the great lockdown of 2020 will have almost like a negative 3% growth globally. Which is even global financial crisis, which was there in 2009, showed 0.1% negative growth. So this is one of the biggest challenge which we are having in front of us, and hopefully I'm sure that the numbers which will be coming out maybe on 24th June will not be very favorable numbers to look into from the new economic outlook which will be coming out by IMF on 24th June. So my first question goes here is that, so who is the main villain? Is Corona the main villain or the lockdown is the main villain? We need to answer that quite a bit of it, that who is the main villain? And because we have seen the lockdown is because of Corona, but we have seen other diseases which have killed more people, but we never had a lockdown. So that's the scale part of it, that how do you answer that question, that who is the main villain? So we'll park this question and maybe we can come back at the end to answer this, that who is the main villain. So the context of my presentation, of which is almost next 20 to 25 minutes, I would like to share, that we are talking about Atmanirbhar, the self-reliant, basically, which is a great word. But if you see the trend of Atmanirbhar, then this is absolutely great. That in early 90s, as a student of economics, when you used to study, we used to talk about global integrations, we used to talk about global market, and then we started moving in that directions, and then now we are starting moving a little bit away from that, and because of Corona and other things, we are seeing that Atmanirbhar can be a good word, and that's absolutely correct, because I think we have seen that because of this lockdown, if you are to some extent self-sufficient, and we don't depend so much on the world to some extent, and then maybe it's a good thing, because we never know, again, if we have a lockdown situation, how bad that situation may be in due course of time. And if you're not self-sufficient and completely depending on the global integration or global market, maybe you may have a difficult time. But so my takeaway is that basically I'm saying that Atmanirbhar is basically a self-reliant, but it's a mixed of, or a milder version of not so much of global integration, but be a self-sufficient from an economics perspective. But I would also like to, and that's my main focus is today, is not, I'll not talk about the self-sufficient economy as such, but I would like to talk more about from an entrepreneurship perspective, a self-sufficient entrepreneur. And that's the takeaway of my session will be today, that how we can be a self-sufficient entrepreneur, because that's the key thing, and that's the way forward, I suppose. Because if you see the unemployment numbers, which is looking pretty bad, and in that unemployment number, as Professor Vyas has also said, that you can divide this unemployment pool into different parts, and I am talking about that part which is a pretty because of unemployment, a skilled manpower, skilled personnel, which will not be utilized properly, or it will be underutilized. So that type of people can lead to their own entrepreneurship, and that's why I'm saying the entrepreneurship is the way forward. And this type of people, instead of going for a new type of job hunting, they can come out with their own ideas and be a successful entrepreneur. So that's my takeaways. And then we, either from economic perspective or economy perspective, we need to support this type of people who will be a support this type of entrepreneur, so that they can become an Atmanirbhar entrepreneur, so that they don't have to depend on various people, and they can be a successful because of various support given by governments and other things. We'll look into that as we go ahead. So that's my concept, is the Atmanirbhar concept coming is from a self-sufficient entrepreneur, how you can become a self-sufficient entrepreneur. And if you can do that, I think you can sustain various recessions, various bad time of the economy if it comes in the future. If you see this, I believe, and I strongly believe on this statement, that crisis is a time of opportunity. The deeper the crisis, the bigger is the opportunity. So we have seen that in the history, and we can definitely see it again in the future. But to do this, there are a few steps which the entrepreneurs should look into it when they are talking about coming or becoming an entrepreneur, or they're already an entrepreneur but going through a bad phase, how they can come back and be a successful entrepreneur again. So I have divided this slide into various points which they need to take care as they go ahead to become a successful entrepreneur. Obviously, the first thing is that which comes to us is that you need to evaluate the current situation where you are now. You need to evaluate the business or the job which you are doing, whether that's the correct way of doing it, or you need to change that. That's the first question you need to answer, because we have seen in our generation people changing job from one end to one company to another company, but we have not seen much of people who change industries for a job. So, but if you're an entrepreneur, you can think from that perspective, that you are a part of a finance guy, but you think there can be a good opportunity. Like, I can give my own example. I'm basically an economics student. I did my PhD in economics. Then I realized that finance is the most interesting part, because I was working as a treasury guy. I was a financial market guy. I started working on that side. Then I was part of the central bank. And then I realized that finance should be merged with technology. And then now I have into the field where I'm trying to use a lot of technology in my consulting for financial industry. So you need to evaluate yourself, that what you are doing at this juncture, is it correct, or you can do much better from that. And once you evaluate this, your own business proposal, then you can take a take a right direction towards it. So evaluation comes first, the evaluation of current situation, and from that you can identify that where to go ahead. And when you do evaluations, one of the way which is I always believe is that do a gap analysis. What you do for a client, you can do it for yourself. Do a gap analysis and try to find out what is the gap is there in that particular economy, in that particular sector, which you can bridge with your entrepreneurship skill. And that's the ideal thing. If you can identify that gap, and if you have the solution to bridge that, that's the best thing which will happen to you. And that's the first thing you should do. And that's why I'm saying evaluation is a key. Once you evaluate your proposal, once you identify the gap, then you can jump into that. And from that, I also go to my next point, which talks about innovations. And this is not a new thing. We have all learned Schumpeter's theory, and where innovations and entrepreneurship goes hand in hand. And you'll see that point which I'm trying to bring home here is that if you have identified the gap, and if you can come out with an innovation solutions, you will definitely be successful. In my next slide, I'll try to show this thing, that how innovations has helped to be a good entrepreneur even in a bad time. So innovation is the key, because if you believe that you have a solution which you innovated and can be a successful thing to bridge the gap, then that's definitely a key thing for you. So you have to be innovative. You cannot copy paste other business model and try to replicate. I think that time has gone. You need to be very innovative so that you can to be a successful person. So innovation is key. You need to go ahead with that type of thing. Now, since our context of this present session is about bad time in economy, coronavirus impacting global lockdown, recession, and all these things. So obviously, third thing which I want to talk about is, again, here is that deliver your work in a very right manner. Fourth thing is, generally we believe that nowadays, because of lot of information which comes through internet in various ways, our people are well informed in that perspective, and then we don't, we don't we don't share our communication with anybody. We assume that this lot of information means they have created informedness in among everyone, but that may not be true always, because you realize that when you speak to somebody, he has a different view, he has not understood maybe the things so properly, and as an entrepreneur it helps a lot to communicate with the other people as much as possible with your own product, with your own process, with your own deliverables. So don't assume that information creates informedness. That can be a myth, and sometimes it can create a problem for you. The second point, the next point which I wanted to bring him is that use experts and forecast carefully. This is a very good thing we should all keep in mind. I'm saying that you have a lot of people who are well informed, experienced, but use this expertise and the forecast carefully, because, as you know, this in economics we say that the forecast which is happening now has, because the economy is changing so much, there's so much of uncertainty, there's so much of structural changes is coming, that most of the forecast can go for a toss. Or even the experts, we consider them expert, were in a different regime expert, but now the economy has changed quite a bit. So use this expert and forecast a little bit cautiously, carefully, because just don't jump based on their past experience and the past forecast. Look at them more carefully, and then take a call. So that will always help you to be a good entrepreneur. The next point is use resilience principles in developing policies. Your own company policies should be developed in such a way that you try to hedge yourself for the recessions which in the future will be coming, or hedge yourself for a negative economic impact. So your policies should be done in a such a way. And in myself, I've been working with some of the companies in Mauritius that we call them a COVID policies now here, that in future, if such types of things happens, how your process, your business process should be fine-tuned in such a way that can take care of it. And then obviously prepare for a change world. That's absolutely correct, because you cannot be static in your entrepreneurship behavior. You have to take up the new change world which is coming in front of you. As Professor Vyas was talking about, working from home is becoming a new normal, and absolutely that's great, because as he rightly said, that people are putting more effort now from working from home, and that's a way forward. Maybe that has got a lot of positive impacts. Obviously there are some negative impacts also, but there are quite a bit of positive impacts. So the point here is that we need to prepare our business model in such a way that we are ready for the change of the world which is coming, and we should accept that. And we've seen that, just to share that point of it, that even in if you do this type of process which I just talked about in these bullet points, you will see that things have even in the wrong time, the things have been pretty good for various companies. We have seen that post recessions, as the recession is coming to an end, we have seen the propensity of IPOs goes up. So people are ready to invest in your more innovative businesses. So that's the study which is I'm referring to here. It talks about that the propensity to IPO goes up after recession just coming to an end, because but the thing is that the propensity of that IPOs will go up which has got innovations in their business proposal. The innovations becomes very key so that it can become so that it can take the opportunities in the crisis. My next slide talks about the success stories that prove economic crises aren't always a bad for business, and these are the great companies which we all know has come out during the recession time. On my left side, if you see, I have tried to give some of the recessions from 1893, and the panic of 1893, US and panic which was there, the Argentina investment, wheat crops failed, and Baring Brothers. That time also the Baring Brothers was on the issue, the oldest bank. that was the issue in 1893, and during that time of this panic situation, we have seen General Electrical, GE, coming into existence with their new business model in 1892, and we know how efficient and how good companies that has been now, and from that period till now. So innovations, again, if you see, innovations was the key, and that time we have seen GE coming out. The panic of 1907 to 1911, again, a big recession period in globally, not globally, I should not use the word globally that time, it was more in the western part. And we have seen that time IBM coming out and talking about that. Then we have seen the Nixon recession, which is from December 1969 to November 1970. And we have seen FedEx as one of the biggest company coming out at the innovative door-to-door delivery, and that's the first time, and people realize that can be a good company to work on, and we have seen that being successful. 1975, Microsoft comes into picture, and see the oil crisis, recessions was there, and we have seen Microsoft as a big successful company coming in 1975, just after the recession was getting over in March 1975. Apple, 2001, people may say, why 2001? Initially, it started in 1974, but 2001 is a great structural changes came in Apple because of the because of your .com problem. It was going down, and then obviously it came out with a product of iPod, and which made them a very successful in 2001. So many people who follows Apple, they say that 2001 was the rebirth of Apple. That's again based on, if you see that time, a recession was very much in from March 2001 to November 2001, the .com problem, the 9/11 attack, and that time this new launch coming of iPhone, it is successfully taken up. Airbnb, another great story, great recession of December 2007 to June 2009. We had seen the subprime problem. We have seen the oil price going up and then crashed, which has created a lot of problem and in the world, a great recession. And we have seen that time Airbnb coming in 2008 and becoming a very success story. Again, you see the innovation coming with that people don't have much money to afford a big hotel or something like that, but people love to travel, so that they came out with the idea, and it has become a quite success story. Same way, the great lockdown 2020, the great lockdown 2020, the major difference of great lockdown 2020 and earlier one is that the earlier recessions were more towards Eastern crisis, and then it had a lagged effect to the Asian countries and other countries. But this great lockdown of 2020 COVID, it has impacted global at the same time. That's the most crucial part and most different part of it. So lag was pretty low in this case compared to the earlier recessions where people can have managed this. But here also I've seen two stories which I just wanted to share with you, and there are many more, but I'm just sharing two stories with you in 2020 where innovations had been a good thing. A small village from Chhattisgarh, they have done a great story which they have converted. There's a fruit which is available which is called mahua, and that mahua is basically used for manufacturing alcohol, but they have converted that and made it a hand sanitizer, because that time hand sanitizer was a rare, like it was not available, there was a lot of scarcity, and they converted that, and that's how it's become a great story there. It is becoming quite successful, and it was done by the village tribal women who came together and developed this thing under one entrepreneur. Another one, textile industry in India, which was showing, which is because of Corona was showing a very bad sign initially, but they have converted in last 2 months. They have converted into a 10,000 crore industry because of PPP industry that is being used by Corona for various Corona warriors who are in the hospital and other places. They are wearing that thing, and that's again innovations, because they have converted textile industry which was dying because of various things, and they have converted into and this has happened in just 2 months, which is great story. to see that. But again, they have come together, innovations has come together, they have tied everything together, and not only they have supplied to India, but they have also supplied, because I know one of the my own client in India, they have been supplying it to Africa in a big way. They are supplying to other Asian countries, the PPE. So that's again a great story to talk about. So the point here again, quickly I come back, is that success stories that prove economic crises aren't always a bad for business. And we have seen historically the big companies, they came out either during the recession or just after the recession or before the recession, but they managed to survive in the recession because of various policies, process they have taken, which I was talking in my earlier slide. So there's nothing so much of negativity. There can be quite a bit of positivity from recession, which you can take away. And if we and think out of the box, if we can be innovation, if we can bring innovations, I think it can be a really successful thing. So that brings me to my next question here quickly, that what an entrepreneur need to become an Atmanirbhar? So basically, what all things you require and support which entrepreneurs should take away from this. So obviously, it starts from a basic thing in the government policy, and as Professor Vyas was talking about, and we have all read, Indian government came out with a big package. If you read the IMF economic outlook of 2020, they also consider, because fiscal stimulus is the main thing now, because if your monetary policy, if you see the monetary policy side, the interest rates have been pretty low. But then that leaves us with this type of recession to come out to it. The fiscal stimulus becomes a very important thing. Just a little bit of point on this fiscal stimulus and economic outlook, which talks about by an IMF report. They talk about one thing, which is the rule-based fiscal stimulus, which is they are emphasizing quite a bit of it. And that is basically that if the most of the stimulus comes, it's rule based. Like if you want to give a temporary target of a cash transaction to a liquidity constrained people because of the unemployment, so you give them that it will automatically get triggered, and the liquidity will be going to the people who doesn't have cash or salary or something like that. But that has got a challenge, which is we need to understand.
Sir, if I may interrupt, you need to share it once more. It's not visible on the screen.
Okay. How much time I have?
Dr. Korani? Hello?
I'm afraid, Dr. Chakraborty, you have bypassed your time by 5 minutes. So please try to be fast.
I'll be fast. I'll just finish it up, but I need to. I think the sharing is having a problem.
Yeah.
Can you see it now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is it visible?
Yes.
Is it visible?
It is visible now.
Okay. So quickly, as I'm sorry for this, but these are the various factors which is required government policies. I wanted to speak on this fiscal stimulus, but anyway, we don't have much time, so we'll go ahead. We need a regulatory framework and infrastructure in a big way, which will support entrepreneurs. We know that, but I just want to stop here in the next point, which is the funding and finance, because government policies and regulatory framework can be efficiently, they can announce the policy, but if we don't have proper well-defined financial inclusion, which may be the issue sometime in countries like India, then it becomes very difficult to that the money reaching to the last mile and to the entrepreneur, it may have a difficulties. So there are few points which he wanted to share, but anyway, if there's a questions, I'll answer that. But I'll go ahead quickly on this funding finance. That becomes very important, that what are the different sources of funding you entrepreneurs have so that they can become self-sufficient. Because sometimes if you're a new entrepreneur, you may not get a very good funding from the banks because they don't want to take a risk on you. So that may be a financial market or a crowdfunding or angel, angel funding. So there are various ways of funding which you can talk about in some other forum, but that becomes very important, that funding and finance becomes easier and entrepreneur get funding. Culture of entrepreneurship should be developed. mentors and advisors are very much important, and universities as a catalyst. I think most of the Indian universities are now looking into it. They can be a really good platform to help new entrepreneurs because they can be a catalyst there. Education and training becomes very crucial. Human capital and workforce for good entrepreneurs. This is a key thing, because why I'm raising it, that's becoming a very important issue in Africa also, that when you think of new business, something, you may not get that type of human capital to run that show. So that's a very important element to develop a self-sufficient entrepreneur, and obviously the local and global markets to sell your deliverables. So these are the key areas which is required to make your things more self-reliant. But now I'd like to take only 5 more minutes. Sorry for that, but I just wanted to talk about this slide. This is the last World Economic Outlook growth projections, which is there. You can see that, but obviously they're saying in 2021 again it will be, the growth will be on the higher side, and the driving force will be emerging and developing Asia, which is the pretty good numbers. We see that for 2021, but I have my little bit personal doubt on that, and you may see that in new economic outlook, because there's a big labor migration which has happened, which Professor Vyas was talking about in India, and that can lead to some of the problem to reach that level of growth in next year, because once the labor has moved away from the main areas in India, like let's say from Bombay it has moved out, from Delhi it has moved out, many main centers, they have moved and gone back to their own villages or own town. Coming back will be a difficult task, and that you have seen this in yesterday's report, which was published by ADB, and they have said that the growth rate of India may be a little bit hampered because of this labor migration. But my theory is that, so should we take it as a challenge or an opportunity? Because in India, we have seen that we have India has grown in a big way, and because of that, within India there's a pocket of development happened. It is not a universal development and a very balanced growth and development happening across the country. There are pockets. Some states are very developed, some states are not so developed, some cities are very developed, some cities are not so developed. So I believe that this labor migration which has happened can be a blessing in disguise for India. And there we can see that. So basically my theory is that the cheap labor, a magnet for capital. We have seen that. Factors affecting FDIs. We have seen that when the money flows from one country to another country, wage rates and a cheap labor becomes a major factor to decide that. And because of that, India gets a lot of FDIs. We know that. But my theory here, we are trying to say that how capital can move from one state to another state now. And there I see that labor can be a major magnet for it. And wherever the labors are situated, I think that the investments can go there. And there can be a distribution of investment within India, which is a very good thing, which can happen, I suppose, in the future. So labor migration, instead of bringing them back all to the main cities again, there can be investment which can flow to those particular states and particular cities where are villages, and can set up the companies there and utilize that labor, which is where the labor intensive is the main model which you're looking about. Because if you see the capital moves from one state to another state, that can be good for India as well, and it can lead to a more balanced growth for India within India, I'm saying. So I think it's an opportunity for us, that instead of looking and asking them to come back to the main cities again and have the same urban problem, it can be a good thing that the capital flows there and goes to wherever is possible. And we have seen that slowly that idea is coming to India, and we have seen some of the investments are going to the rural sector now for manufacturing units, where the labors can be or for the real estate sector, where you're seeing that the B towns are getting more investment there, like not the major cities, but the smaller town are getting some sort of investment there, because the capital is flowing towards that. So capital migration within the country, following the labor, can be the thing. So I just wanted to share this idea with you, that if they're going, let them go. Don't push them to come back with all the problems, but at least the capital can flow there, and you can set up their own companies there, and utilize that skilled labor which is available. So with that, these are the references which I've used for this presentation. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to take some questions if you have any. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Chakrabarty. Maybe one or two questions, please. Don't hear anybody?
Hello.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, sir, we'll take the questions later on. We move ahead with the next presenter, sir, please.
Fair enough.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
So then, Dr. Chakrabarty, you might introduce me.
The next session is by Dr. Korane, and the session moderator is Dr. Chiragra Chakrabarty. So, Dr. Chakrabarty, please take over the session.
Thank you very much. It's my honor to introduce Dr. Korane, because I was going through his profile, and it's an extremely wonderful profile to introduce. He's the President, CEO of Arbonet Limited. Pardon me if my pronunciation is not correct for the name. You can correct that. Arbonet is a world-leading provider of remote-based services in forest management. He has PhD in agriculture and forestry. He has also a PhD in math and other subjects. But today's session, which he wants to share today, is, I think it will be very interesting to hear from him, is that entrepreneurship, science, and the purpose of company in an economic crisis. So definitely, I think that would be a very interesting session to listen. I have few questions which I will be asking to him once he finishes. So, sir, the platform is yours. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to be brief. My video is on. I don't know if you can see me, but I hope so.
Yeah, you can see.
We can see you. We can hear you.
Thank you. So indeed, it's a great pleasure. I want to thank the Honorable Vice Chancellor and Professor Danesh Patel, a longtime friend, with whom I was now invited to join this session. I'm always humbled when I'm asked to talk about entrepreneurship in a state like Gujarat, which I regard like one of the worldwide homes of entrepreneurship. As you know, your state has always been the one to send people abroad and start companies. But in the current time of COVID crisis, I thought that I'll focus on something that somehow always I meet whenever I come to India, which is the question about the moral principles of this world. Now, in your world, in Gujarat especially, competition is very fierce, and you often feel like being in a pressure kettle in a way of competitive businesses, but yet there is some kind of tranquility coming from your long history and long philosophical tradition that I find very, very impressive, and often face people asking that. So I thought that I'll try to go down to the heart of an entrepreneurship process, what kind of questions you ask, and especially if, like me, you're actually a scientist turned into an entrepreneur. So my own background is in mathematics, just like Professor Patel's, and I always wanted to be a scientist first, but for various reasons ended up founding the company called Arbonet. And let me just try to share two slides, or two screenshots rather, on Arbonet, to give you a little background, like this one, and let's see if you can see it here. Can you see my screen?
Not yet, sir. Not yet, sir.
Let's see if it is coming up. Okay, it says, let me see now. Here we go. I have to apparently allow something here.
I think they have to allow you for the presenting this.
Could be.
The presentation lights up. Yes, sir. It is. It's now on the screen.
Okay. Okay. Very good. So I just wanted to briefly tell what are we doing. Can you see the page with forest inventory on it?
Yes. Yes, sir. It is.
Very good. So Argonaut is a forest company that I founded 26 years ago as a kind of an accident that thought that, okay, a company would be a good instrument to have science make a positive impact on the world. And now the part of the world where we reside is in eastern Finland, close to Russian taiga. Forestry is very prominent here, not only as an economic activity, but also as an academic endeavor. We, for example, host the European Forest Institute, the primary European Forest Research Institute in our town. So very quickly, it became clear that if you want to create a global business, then in this particular place, a rural town in eastern Finland, forestry is the thing to do. And this is more or less what we have been doing for the last 25 years. Here's the Argonaut world map. So these are the countries in which we have conducted operations over the last 5 years or so. India too, but actually in two ways. We've done a bioenergy assessment of certain states in India, not Gujarat. And then we train every year Indian foresters in service of Indian Forest Service. You have a very, very well-working system where you take people in their mid-career and have them spend a few months, maybe 6 months, learning and modernizing their skills in their profession. And so every year about 40 to 80 Indian foresters arrive in our small town, up here, if you can see, and then spend some time with us learning about foresting and how to do that for modernizing your forestry. But that's all about the company in a way. I now come back and I'll stop sharing and I'll turn into a video. I don't have any presentation now, but instead wanted to tell you how a person facing, let's say, a crisis in his or her life, working in a university. Many of you have this background in academia and have struggled hard to earn your PhD or are still in the middle of that process. How you can think about becoming an entrepreneur and what kind of issues become important. I generally, by the way, agree with Dr. Chakrabarty's view of how to perceive these opportunities, and particularly in this kind of a situation where we face a lockdown crisis and the possible economic consequences. Looking at this distributed nature of skills and distributed nature of the resources available to you is vital. You have to know where you can source and on what kind of, let's say, entrepreneurial basis, often more like employment basis, you can find talent and you can find access to markets. And this is what Argonaut has been doing. So we only have about 60 employees that come from 20 different nationalities. So one of the principles we have applied is that I try to recruit foreign nationals, mostly from master programs in Finland, international master programs, so that they have the right kind of skills in IT and forestry and geoinformatics, the kind of specialities we need. But they also know their home market and have knowledge of what kind of needs forest activities, be they for conservation, for climate change purposes, or for timber production, what do they need? What kind of things are decisive? And because of that, we so far have survived reasonably well this current recession, that this habit of working remotely from home was already ingrained in the company when the lockdown started. And actually, in some ways, and this seminar, I think, is a good example, it made work even efficient because there's essentially no travel at the moment. So we don't spend time on trains and airplanes. Instead, we can keep on doing our work and attending meetings with many people like this. And because it's now accepted worldwide in a way that this is the way to go under COVID lockdown, then business has somehow been promoted by this. Another thing which has been very important in the Finnish case so far has been kind of financial bridging that the government has provided. So a lot of businesses suffered a lot and there was this potential risk. So governments have suddenly decided to provide grants to companies, not to individuals, but to companies, plus then also increase government spending on infrastructure projects and things like forestry as well. So that meant that for the time being, we haven't yet seen a crisis in terms of that, but of course it may still come because of the global slowdown of the economy. So with that, I want to go to the heart of the matter, which is, if you want to become an entrepreneur, what is your primary motive? It could be making money. It could be your own boss, or it could be innovation, creation. You want to create something new that doesn't exist at the moment. They are all good motives in some ways, but I suggest you start from the last one. Create something new. Then be your own boss. All of us have had our problems with our bosses, and I think this idea of a survivalist entrepreneur comes very close to that. And of course, you hope to make money, but that should come as a consequence, not as a primary goal of your activity. I'll come back to this point later on. Now, of course, if you have become a scientist or a university academician and you want to, or you have this aspiration, then also you have to ask yourself that, why are you doing this? What is the primary motivation for that? And typical ones, at least I have had at some point in time, is you may want to find out something new, or you may want to create something that helps people. It's actually surprisingly common, and I think widely shared, that people go to science for rather unselfish reasons. They want to create something that makes the world a better place. Or maybe the traditional role of science, in which I have great respect for Indian philosophy. Think deeply and understand the universe. You want to understand as deeply as possible what goes on around you, be that physical, be that the business world, be that biology, whatever happens to be your target. Now, in universities, it's often common to have an idea, which I regard a kind of a misconception. I'll tell you why, that entrepreneurs are greedy and selfish. That basically a person becomes an entrepreneur because he wants to, become rich and famous and so on. Well, no doubt many entrepreneurial people have that kind of appearance, but there's a catch in every company, which is the fact that you cannot make money unless you're able to persuade customers to actually pay something for your product or for your services. So that's something that people with government jobs normally don't easily realize, that you don't make money from your own will. You only make it if you're able to create something that other people really want, and want to the extent that they are willing to pay for it. So you end up being a servant of your customers. And this is something that it's actually deeply humbling in a way to realize that the only way you become successful as an entrepreneur is to be able to serve others so that they are grateful for your services. Whereas scientists often think of themselves as being unselfish servants of the truth. Again, something that I felt often, but it's only too easy to fall in love with your own ideas, with your own thinking. It's a very somehow idiosyncratic field that you make science by being creative in your own mind and then publishing and writing papers about that, and this personal creativity is valued so highly that it becomes almost like an obsession in a way, that it was I who invented this or that particular thing. And then you often see other competing ideas like competitors. You become enamored to your own way of thinking, and that's not a very selfish thing to do, in fact. So even if you do it in service of society, your own ideas may become your kind of idol or god. And this results often in all kinds of clashes of cultures, schools of thought, and of course is reflected in appointments, academic appointments, who gets a professorship or a doctoral student position and so on. So it's not always that clear-cut and clean. So then I think the the moral question, or somehow the internal question that you need to resolve if you have a scientific or university background and you're contemplating becoming an entrepreneur, is that how do you combine, first of all, the science, which is the freedom to choose the topic, the freedom to choose what you want to understand of this world. What is your field of science? What is your particular topic of research? What kind of impact might that have? Let's say a typical case that has been a big factor in my career has been climate change in various forms. I used to work in weather forecasting and climate forecasting for a long time. But then entrepreneurship provides this other aspect, the freedom to decide what you want to do next, what action to take. So in university, you are normally subjected to this dilemma that it's publish or perish. You have to publish research in order to get your PhD, in order to promote your career. And publication and publishing is not actually that, how to say, straightforward and honest activity. It's something that you need to get your articles through as highly ranked journals as possible. And that means they are subjected to peer review, which more or less means that they have to comply with the habits and ways of thinking of that particular scientific school of thought that the journal and the readers adhere to. And you have to keep on publishing. So actually spending a lot of time thinking and not publishing is not possible in science. Again, in entrepreneurship, the downside is the financial insecurity, that you can decide what you're doing yourself, but you're a survivalist entrepreneur. So you're actually then your own success, your own future depends on how good decisions you're able to make. And of course, we all make mistakes. It's almost necessary to make mistakes, and sometimes they prove fatal. So you have like a benefit in both and a downside, the other side of the coin in both. And how to choose the right combination or the right career for you. And I feel that I can see some kind of a golden path that somehow seeks into the inner heart of each and every one of us in their own way, that try to find a goal, a general goal that you think you could live for, that is worth your effort, your work, be that, inventing something new or understanding something or creating something in service of the society, but something that you feel that you could get a passion for. And then, if possible, try to join a group of people that you like to work with who share this interest. And increasingly, these communities can be found online or in this sort of like discussing about the migration of labor and skilled resources and so on. So, for example, in Argonaut's case, we invariably work in other countries with companies, often entrepreneurial as well, who know the market, the forest market of that company, and especially whom the customers already know. But very often there's some kind of a common mindset, common confidence, common trust. In the end, you need this trust that builds over time, but sometimes you simply get that by personal affiliation to the person you're working with. So you need a network of people that doesn't have to be physically local, but that you need to somehow recognize as your soulmates, one way or another. And yet, these people, normally, they are not similar to you. You must appreciate diversity. You must appreciate that they can be totally different skill sets. They come from a different culture and country, but they also often have a different background. In my case, a bit surprisingly, many of my entrepreneurial colleagues have some kind of distant background in military service. It's strange in a way, because I'm not the soldierly type myself at all, but very often foresters have that kind of, they're people who chose between military service or forestry. Both are outdoor activities, but they went for forestry because of hating the discipline you needed, or maybe took some years of that and then decided to become entrepreneurs. So then we finally come to the final question, the main question: what is the purpose of a company? And I think that here is a point where we are most often misled by current dogma, especially American dogma. In America, it's actually a matter of law that a company's only purpose is to make money for shareholders. And I think it couldn't be more wrong. I mean, it's of course one way to define a company. It's a purely financial entity, but that's exactly the way in which you end up in trouble. The way you should see your company, especially if it's your company, that must have this purpose that you think you can live for and that you hope others will also appreciate. And for me, the purpose of a company is something that an entrepreneur to some extent can define if you're the majority owner. Of course, you can't ignore finance, you can't ignore your other shareholders, but as an entrepreneur, by definition, if you want your company to make less money but do more good or be more innovative, you have full right to do so. And that particular determination and courage to make those decisions are the primary source of the resilience, the skill, the stamina you need to survive in crisis. So for Arbonaut, just to briefly summarize, I think the central idea we live for is forests are important. They are very important in India too, for a lot of people that live in those forests. So it's also, we can never think about forests without the people who depend on those forests. It's also very true in Africa as we operate, and also actually in Northern Europe, Siberia, and so on. Climate change is one of the primary things that will not go away because of COVID. It will still be there. Forest fires are a particular target for us right now, how to somehow help different countries mitigate the impact of forest fires, limit their extent, and suppress them faster. And then cool technology. We are an internet company, so that means that we work with remote sensing and with IT systems, cloud services, and try to combine them to something that has an operational implication on the field when people are planning what to do with forest and executing those plans. Then also, I hope Arbonaut is a nice place to work. This is something where something surprising happened. We, for example, never had any control of working hours. Anybody can come and go as they like, work whenever they like, as long as they keep their peers and their bosses more or less informed of where they stand and what are the next steps they're going to do, which you can do remotely. So that spirit has caused that a lot of people really work from home already now, and they work at night times if they want to. But that has made them feel responsible for the output of their work. And for that reason, they were able to continue, and all others imitated their practice when lockdown came and we all stayed at home. And finally, global approach and equality. We have to indeed remember that we share this one planet. We have to try to somehow appreciate and understand diversity all across the planet and see equal value in every human being, maybe even beyond human being. Now again, coming back to the heart of Hinduism, that there is value in all living things, and we should not violate it. We should try to cherish it. With that, I wish to conclude. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I wish you a successful continuation of the webinar. Of course, I'm happy to respond to any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. It was really nice. Thank you. Thank you. Should we have the questions now? Patel, or?
Yeah, there is a question in the chat box.
Okay.
There is a question, and the question is from Dr. Jain Kumar, and the question is, we can make the capital mobile wherever possible, but what can we do to for the revival of location-based industries such as construction industry?
And this was a question to you, Dr. Chakrabarti.
I mean, sir, it was to you as well, so.
No, but Dr. Chakrabarti, please answer.
Okay, I'll take it up. I think that's a
We may have lost Dr. Chakrabarti.
Yeah, we have lost, I think there's some connectivity issue. Sir, if you would like to respond to this question as to how we can look into, local industries and issues related to them.
Well, I think this is, in a way, it's a challenge and nobody has a definite answer to this particular thing. The markets have to pick up once again, and they will take a time before that. But I think the one thing that governments can and should do is to be financially generous right now. There is kind of blessing of providing the financial resources because every country is more or less in the same situation. So right now, there's no fear of massive inflation. So I think that public financial incentive for example, construction industries would be a good thing, one possible way to help. But
thank you, sir. I think we have Dr. Chakrabarti with us again. Dr. Chakrabarti, can you please take over the session?
Sorry, it got disconnected. I'm so sorry. Yeah, question it was asking about the. Sorry, what was the question?
Yeah,
we can make the capital. Yeah, correct.
Yeah, we can move the capital migration, but what will happen to the localized industry? That's precisely, I think it's a very good question to answer. But the theme and in context of India is that when you have a localized space, construction, real estate, as you rightly said, to some extent, if you have a very skewed distribution of it, we'll have the same problem of urbanization which you have in India now. But if you can redistribute that localized industries also, that can be a very useful thing, so that capital also flows there, and that place also gets development because of the linkages which you have there. One of the example I can give it to you, the localized industry, how it has been, how the capital has started moving there. I can give an example of both African country, and they are known for diamond. And they have got a very link with Gujarat, because many people come to work in the diamond industry from Surat and other places. But what is to happen that the most of the diamond either is to go from Botswana to Surat to Europe, and Botswana never is to get much of a return from the diamond what they are supposed to get. But then the government came out, because the mines are in Botswana, but rest of the things were the value addition becomes outside Botswana. So government had that time said that the entire process was set up in Botswana now, and now from the diamond production and entire policy value addition, they get almost 60 to 70% revenue, which is based in which is in Botswana itself. So the point I'm trying to bring home is that the localized industry, if that can be redistributed along with the capital as well as wherever the labors are available, then it will lead to a more balanced growth. Thank you. I hope I could answer your question, Dr. Jayankumar.
Thank you, sir. We move on to the next presentation. The next presentation is by Professor Paresh Date, and the moderator for this presentation is Dr. Anindya Chakrabarti. So I hand over the session to Dr. Anindya. Sir?
Yeah, thank you very much. So first of all, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay, excellent. So it's a great pleasure of mine to be present in this nice workshop, and it's a great pleasure to introduce Professor Date. And so he completed his master's degree in 1995 in IIT Mumbai, and I'll just give a brief intro of some of the background of his work, and then we can get into the topic of his presentation. And so just to continue with my earlier statement, after doing his master's, he did a PhD from the University of Cambridge in 2000, and after that he has been a professor in the Department of Mathematics at Brunel University in London from 2002, where he is currently the Director of Research. And and financial mathematics, where he has published more than 40 reference journal articles, and he holds multiple visiting professorships across multiple institutes and universities all over the world. And he is currently an associate professor of IMA Journal of Management Mathematics. So today his topic, I will just quickly look into. I guess it's just relates to the broad theme of the discussion, which is leading your business through economic crisis. So with that, I would like to hand it over to Professor Dace to give his talk. You have, I'll just quickly check. You have 30 minutes. So we might be taking the questions depending on how we do in terms of time at the end of your talk. Thank you very much, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Anindya. Can people see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yeah, it's visible. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So this is a slightly different title of my talk. Thank you for organizing this nice webinar, Professor Patel and Honorable Vice Chancellor of the MSU. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to share the dais with, well, virtually with Chirag, Professor Ralph Cohn, and Tuomo. So that's the slightly different title of my talk, Risky Business, Managing Risk Through Economic Crisis. So it's a somewhat different talk than Chirag or Tuomo's talk earlier. It is a little bit technical, and it is about managing risk for cash flows through economic crisis. Not too technical, I hope. So that's an outline of my talk. So I'll talk briefly about what risk is, how you measure market risk, and with view of current COVID-19 crisis, I will talk a little bit about pitfalls in risk management, or at least traditional risk management for cash flows during crisis, and a little bit about some emerging opportunities, especially for India. So the talk is partly based on my own research, partly about chit chat and gossip I hear from my past PhD students working in the city of London. So there will be bits which are technical, bits which are sort of overheard gossip, but hopefully most or all of it will be useful, and at least some of it will be new to most of you. So here is a Webster dictionary definition for risk, which is the chance that an investment such as stock or commodity will lose value. So that has two keywords. One is chance and one is value. So we characterize any financial risk by that chance or probability of loss, and value or magnitude or impact.
Sorry to interrupt here. People cannot hear you. So there was a message which says that please bring your microphone closer to your mouth and speak.
Okay,
Yeah,
can you hear
this
me
might
now?
Yeah, this might be better.
Right. Do you want me to, I mean, from what point did you lose me entirely?
So I could hear you throughout, but there were some messages saying that
Okay,
you
so
were.
I will continue anyway from where I am right now. So I just started talking about definition of risk. It is chance or probability that an investment might lose value. And so there is a word chance and value in there. So we characterize financial risk by that chance or probability of loss, and size of that loss or magnitude or impact of that loss, and time horizon. So I wouldn't talk about time horizon. We will be thinking essentially short time horizons, not very long. So in very long time horizon, all of us are dead with probability 1. So we will discount that. We'll just think about short and medium horizons. And broadly, there are two interesting categories of risk. One is high probability, low impact risk. So things which are likely to happen, hopefully not very likely, otherwise they won't be risks. So say there might be a probability that there is 5% or 10% probability, but the impact is relatively small, and I'll give examples. And the other is low probability but very high impact risk. So again, we'll see some examples of these as well. Uh, for people who do behavioral finance, and I suppose there are some amongst the 97 or so people who are registered and listening, uh, it is known that we tend to overvalue or overweigh the magnitude of loss in high probability risk and underweigh the magnitude of loss in low probability risk, even though the low probability risks are frequently far more crucial to insure. Why? Partly because it is simply easier to visualize high probability risks, and you can fret about them relatively easily. You can lose your sleep over them relatively easily. So for example, any minor fall, so minor, I'm not thinking very small, say losing value by of your stock holdings by 10% is a minor fall. It's not wiping you out, but it can still make you fret about it, perhaps disproportionately as compared to the money lost. Or similarly, any disruption in a supply chain if you're a manufacturer. It is much harder to visualize very large losses, which are very small probabilities, such as major stock market crashes, or such as current situation. For example, if you're in a business which is currently in very bad shape and is unlikely to recover for next 2 or 3 years. Further, so the interesting part is still this low probability, high impact risks. We tend to underestimate that low probability even further. I mean, it might be low, but it is probably not as low as we think it is. And we will also come to an example later, as in very soon. So broadly speaking, there are 3 or 4 different types of risk to finances of a company. One is market risk, which is risk of loss due to changes in prices. The other is credit risk, which is risk of loss due to default of any debt owed to you. Then the third is op risk or operational risk, which is risk of loss due to inadequate processes and procedures. The fourth, not listed here, is liquidity risk. Although I consider that more or less as part of market risk, I will focus mainly on market risk and mention liquidity risk only towards the end. So what I will do now is talk a little bit about how to measure market risk. This is something straight from an undergrad course on risk management. But bear with me, I will introduce this so that we can look at a real life example of um, current situation in India. So a popular risk measure for portfolio of financial assets is something called VAR or value at risk. I wouldn't define it formally, but here's an example. If we say that time horizon 1 day, confidence 95%, and my 1 day 95% VAR is minus 1%, then that would mean that I'm 95% sure that the portfolio will not lose more than 1% in next 1 day. So similarly, I may have 1 day 99% VAR as minus 2%. So I am 99% sure that I won't lose more than minus 2%, only 95% sure that it won't lose more than 1%, and so on. So why is this single number important? It has been in use since the 90s. Capital adequacy of financial institutions is measured using multiples of value at risk. So financial institutions need to hold tier 1 or tier 2 capital to cover market risk as expressed by VAR. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay, good.
Please go ahead.
Thanks. Um, so typically, you would, I mean, banks report 10-day 99% VAR, but there are variations, and commodity companies have different requirements and so on. But for financial institutions in general, this is an unreasonably important number. So two very common methods to measure VAR. The first one is historic simulation, which is very simple. It doesn't really require any mathematics or any mathematical model. If, let's say, in last 200 days, so you are just looking at recent past. Let's say in last 200 days, your 10th worst loss. So you just look at your day's profit and losses every day and rank them from the highest profit to the worst loss. And your 10th worst loss is 1.1%. Then your one day 95% VAR is minus 1.1%, because that is 10th out of 200 days, that is there is 0.05% chance of losing more than 1.1% in the next day. So you're assuming that history will repeat itself tomorrow, or your next one day, your return will be one of last 200 returns. So the 10th worst loss out of 200 returns is your 95% VAR. Similarly, second worst loss will be your 99% VAR. So there is no model assumed, there is no probability distribution, or there is no sophisticated method. You just assume that history repeats itself. This has issues, and we will see an example. So depending on whom you ask, second most common method or the most common method is just using normal distribution. So what I would call normal case, normal both in colloquial sense and normal because it's using normal distribution. So for normal distribution, your 95% quantile and 99% quantile, it's simply a constant time standard deviation. And those are those constants. You can get them in Excel very easily. And you can find those that standard deviation from historical data. So you still need historical data. This is a very easy and very, very commonly used model. It's frighteningly commonly used based on my conversations with quantitative analysts in City of London. It is very reasonable for 95% type of confidence intervals, poor and increasingly poor as you go to 99% or 99.9%. You don't have to use normal distribution. Obviously, you can use other distributions such as extreme value distribution or Pareto distribution and so on, which tend to model low probability losses much better. So recall, we are talking about low probability, high impact situations. Further, if you have some securities which are nonlinear functions of your asset returns, so without going into technical details, we are talking about options. You will need to use Monte Carlo simulation. But the principle is still the same. So if you generate lots and lots of Monte Carlo scenarios, let's say 10,000 scenarios, then fifth out of 100 worst, 100 losses, fifth worst out of 100 losses is same as 500th worst out of 10,000 losses. And that would represent your 95% VAR. So 10,000 is a big number. Monte Carlo of derivative portfolios can be quite resource intensive. And approximate evaluation or speed up methods for Monte Carlo is a very active research area. So just in passing, it is worth mentioning something called conditional value at risk or expected shortfall or CVAR. That's a somewhat better measure of risk, and it measures the expected or average loss if the loss exceeds VAR. So if your loss, if you're measuring 95% VAR, you're 95% sure that the loss is not greater than, say, 1%. Then CVAR measures the average loss if the loss is greater than 1%. This is very relevant for credit risk. So it might be possible that your borrower will repay their loan with 99% certainty. That would mean that your 95% VAR is zero, right? Because there is more than 95% probability that the loan will be repaid. But 99% VAR might be minus 100% because there is 1% probability that you will get nothing back. So in such cases, it helps if you look at CVAR. In addition, your optimization problem about which, say, Professor Kohn can speak far more knowledgeably than I do, such that you minimize conditional value at risk. It is relatively harder to minimize value at risk numerically. So value at risk is a single number. It is very easy to understand, and it is used through internal models of banks to determine capital adequacy. But it is also necessary to test whether financial institution can cope with severe economic scenario. So for that, stress tests are used, at least for financial institutions. Other medium scale enterprises should also really design and use their own stress test. So Reserve Bank of India or Bank of England design or define stress tests to test resilience of banking institutions against macroeconomic shocks. So for example, the 2019 stress test scenario, which was published, had a very large number of parameters for financial institutions to implement and test where they stand. So that included sterling exchange rate falling by 30%, Bank of England base rate increasing 8 times, and UK GDP falling by 4.7%, and so on. Now, if you talk to multinationals, then they find it particularly painful that different sovereign regulatory bodies have different stress test scenarios. So any risk office, say of HSBC or Fidelity, will have to design and run the scenario generation engines for different countries separately and report them separately. Also, since I talked about tier 1, tier 2 capital, it's interesting. There is interesting tussle between risk offices and trading offices, because the higher VAR number that you come up, the more capital the bank has to set aside, which means there is less money available to play with or to trade. So a risk office is always a cost center, a trading office is always a profit center. And there is always an interesting tussle. The trading office will like as small a risk number as possible, and the risk office will like obviously as realistic a risk number as you can get. So that was a little background. Let's look at India's very recent data. This is a simple spreadsheet example, no complicated maths here. So let's say your portfolio is Sensex futures or a representative portfolio of Indian stocks. And I looked at 200 days as in my example. And I looked at 10th and 2nd worst loss. So my 200 days are days ending on 31st of December last year. And 10th and 2nd worst loss were 1.27%, 2.01%. So with negative signs because they are losses. If I use instead standard deviation over those 200 days returns, then the losses will be a little bit higher, 1.48% and 2.1%. So Professor Chakrabarti earlier talked about using forecasts with care. So here is what my forecast would have been as of say 1st of January 2020. If this is the VAR model I use normal distribution based model. Then in the next 100 days, my 95% VAR is 1.48%, which means that I am 95% sure that I won't lose more than 1.48% in next day. Or equivalently, and I'm skipping some of the assumptions there, equivalently in next 100 days, I won't lose more than 1.48%, maybe more than 5 times, right? 5 days out of 100 days, I won't lose more than 1.48%. That's my 95% VAR. Similarly, I won't lose more than 2.1%, because that's my 99% VAR. I won't lose more than once. So that would have been my prediction. Happened. So the loss was more than my 95% VAR. 16 times. And there was one day when the single day loss was 13.15%. Okay, so our literal models, historic simulation, and in time normal in terms of crisis. And the takeaway lesson is history does repeat itself, but over long time horizons. Recent history is no guide to the future. And macroeconomic shocks typically increase volatilities, they change correlations quite drastically. And your best bet is look further back to the last crisis and stress test your business against the conditions at the time. So value at risk type measures, the single number measures, are very poor at measuring such very low probability, high impact risks. So these are some general lessons. History does repeat itself. I don't know how far back you need to go, probably very far, to compare the situation with COVID-19 crisis. Like Professor Chakrabarti said, it's not enough to go back to 2009. Maybe you will have to go back to the tulip crisis during Dutch period in 1800s or somewhere sufficiently back. Um, One other lesson, again, talking to colleagues and alumni in the city, is you need to diversify. So diversify your suppliers, borrowers, customers, stock holdings, diversify essentially all your risk sources. So some supplier or borrower is going to go under during next downturn. And if you have only one supplier or one major supplier, then that going bust is a classic low probability, high impact risk. And if there is something you can't afford to lose, then you should insure it. You should insure it using classical insurance, uh, or you should hedge it using appropriate derivatives if you can. So I have put if you can before both the last points, because it may or may not be possible. So emerging directions, perhaps we need new crisis derivatives to deal with this. So many of those who do risk management or financial management would be familiar with something called interest rate cap, which is a derivative which acts as an insurance, amongst other things, against a reference borrowing rate becoming too high. You can design a product which ensures against borrowing becoming expensive and a fall in GDP, and perhaps the currency, foreign exchange becoming too expensive, and so on. Right? So it is mathematically it is possible to design such instruments. I haven't come across, at least in Indian space, I haven't come across institutions which actually design and sell such basket insurances. In general, what I have found in India is that financial maths is not very widely covered, and structuring over the counter derivatives is not taught. And MSU is an honorable exception, that they do teach financial maths at master's level. So that's just statement of fact. I'm not saying this simply because this was organized by MSU. There are not many and probably any financial maths master's courses in Indian universities at the moment. So I will mention liquidity risk right at the end. So that is one emerging direction that some people in London are working on. So markets tend to freeze. That is, the transactions suddenly tend to die out. And price discovery in markets, which are otherwise liquid, for example, real estate markets, but which suddenly become illiquid, is an open and relevant area of research. If anybody is amongst the listeners is looking for a PhD topic, for example, in financial maths, such two-phase mathematical models for liquidity is a very active area. So that's what I wanted to talk about. Thanks again for the opportunity, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, excellent. So first of all, thank you very much for this excellent talk. And I think we have, out of your allotted time, a few more minutes left. So if Professor Ganesh Patel agrees, then maybe we can take up a couple of questions now.
We can take some of the. So there's a question in the chat box. We can take that question.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you. So, yeah, please go ahead.
So there is a question, first of all, to earlier to Tomo as well. Tomo, do you first want to come in and answer that? Okay, he doesn't seem to be there.
So maybe you can take up the question by Mr. Ravi Kumar,
Sure.
which is on.
Sure.
Yeah.
So a recent reduction in interest rates. So interest rate risk, it depends on which direction your risk is, Ravi. So if you are borrowing, then you have one particular type of risk, and increasing interest rate is your main risk. If you're lending, then your risk is in opposite direction. So from point of view of incentivizing economy, obviously reduction in interest rate is good. But from point of view of individual financial institutions, it depends on their own market position. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Right. This is Tomo Kauronen. Maybe I can answer the question addressed.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, there seems to be an echo, so I suppose several people have the microphones on, but let's. So what practical steps? It is indeed a more pertinent, more current question. I think the most important practical thing is to first ensure you're hedging your financial situation if possible. And this is exactly where I think government measures are quite central and important. And in our case, for example, it simply meant that government offered guarantees for bank loans that companies could take to buffer up for capital. And this was the first thing we did. So somehow roll over the financial structure so that you have some reserve capital. Second, obviously, is to ensure that your customers are able to pay. And in this case, now since our customers are public sector agencies, we knew that they would be solvent. So we were in a better position than many private industries. And you know, there's a downside working for the government. The processes are very slow and bureaucratic and so on. But here we had an upside, the fact that, okay, we knew that we will get paid for whatever work we can proceed with. And the third step, obviously, is to look at your staff cost and other cost structures. In this case, I would like to rhyme with Dr. Chakrabarty's idea that the more you have this sort of business-to-business entrepreneurial arrangements with your partners, rather than having them on your payroll, the easier it is to be flexible. One more practical thing that I have done on my payroll is that since I hire a lot of students, they are part-time workers and they only work as required. So that gives a certain flexibility to employment without harming the position of these people, the students themselves, too badly, because they can always return to their studies. So these were the kind of practical things for financial management when a sudden crisis hits that I was referring to. They may be specific to Argonaut situation, but hope they answer your question.
You need to unmute your microphone.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so Dr. Jayan Kumar's question is, in spite of risk-based capital adequacy ratio, banks are not showing any confidence. So I presume that is to do with the banks not showing confidence in lending. That is mainly, I mean, at least in the UK's context, I don't know. Obviously, I haven't been to India for a while now because of how things are. But at least in the UK, they are not lending because we are in an unprecedented situation. And historic data, near history or going back to 2000, going back to lifespans of current bankers is not telling them really what is going to happen. So lending is very, very reluctant, apart from government twisting hands of lenders to release money. That's the situation in India, sorry, in the UK. I presume it would be something similar in India as well. Does that answer your question, Dr. Kumar?
So given the paucity of time, I think we need to stop here. And thank you very much, Professor Date. It was a very nice talk and very illuminating. I'll hand it over to Professor Ganesh Patel and coordinate answers for.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So, Professor Patel or Professor Sekhi, you may want to.
So am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
The next presentation is by Professor Ralph Korn. And can I request Professor Paresh Tate to please introduce Dr. Ralph Korn?
Sure. Well, it's a pleasure and an honor to introduce Professor Dr. Ralph Korn. He studied mathematics with economics at Johannes Gutenberg University. I hope my pronunciation is correct, at Mainz, where he did his PhD in 1993 and his habilitation in maths in 1997. So I guess the English translation of habilitation would be higher doctorate. So currently he is full professor of financial mathematics and stochastic control at Department of Mathematics in Technical University at Kaiserslautern. He will be talking about consume as long as you have or save for bad times. Worst case, optimal consumption. Over to you, Professor Korn.
Okay, thanks a lot. I hope you can hear me all.
Yes.
And I'm hoping that I can share my screen now. So it seems that I do not have the right at the moment. So is it possible that you hand over the moderator rights to me so that I can share the screen? So sorry, but I still don't have the rights that I can share the screen with you. So it would be nice to hand that over to me.
So we are working it out. The rights have been given to you, but we are still working it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
As long okay.
Professor Cohn, you still haven't got.
I still haven't got the rights here. Let me maybe do one thing. I just go out and go to another framework. I'll be back in a minute and then we look if that is working. Okay, just a moment.
Hello.
Yes, I'm there again.
Yes,
So
I have your PPT, and we will share from my side.
okay, so let's see if that works. Can you see my slides now?
Yes, yes, indeed.
This is great. So
Yes, so we can.
perfect. So sorry about that. In fact, I would like to thank you all, Paresh, for the kind introduction and you all for this honorable invitation. And I would like to not give you advice on how to lead you through the crisis, but will equip you with a possible tool that should help you in future terms of crisis. So as that the talk is save for the bad times or consume as long as you have, and you will see, although there are a lot of technical formulas, there are also a lot of takeaway messages that you can get. So let me first give a little bit of credit to my co-authors, and I'm not going through the list, so you get the slides anyway. And let me then start with a preliminary remark. So assume that possibly during your lifetime, you may experience a once-in-a-lifetime catastrophe. And if you look at my examples, maybe all of you have experienced the subprime crisis and now the corona crisis. So it's maybe not a once-in-a-lifetime catastrophe, but for just convenience, assume that something like this exists. Now, if it's a once-in-a-lifetime crisis, you will have no idea about the probability to judge how likely it is to experience it. It's just, it may be or it may not be. So this is called Knightian uncertainty. No idea about the distribution of that crisis or whatever. On top of that, let's assume that at that event, you lose an a priori unknown fraction of your wealth invested in stocks. So at the stock market, you lose. You will not make a gain. You maybe don't know how much, but you know you lose. And then my question is, if you have all this knowledge, would you build up extra savings for the bad times to come? Or would you spend more as long as you have it? And this is a question that has a nice answer in the end, because I can solve my problem completely, but the answer is not a unique one. And this is related to so-called the worst case approach to optimal portfolios and consumption problems. Let me formally define what portfolio optimization means. It means you have to decide how many shares of which security you should hold at what point in time to maximize your expected utility from final wealth at time t. So it's a very complicated problem, dynamic in time. You have a choice problem, you have a problem of amounts, so it's not easy. In fact, however, this seems to be a classical problem, because already 3,000 years ago, the Babylonians had first suggestions how to divide your wealth. And of course, they formulated in different ways, but land was the land, production tools were plows or whatever, and liquid assets were spices or precious metals. In the literature, there seems to be agreement on the aspect of diversification. So like that saying, do not put all your eggs in one basket because it's too risky if you drop the basket, or the strategy of the Merchant of Venice in Shakespeare's play. These are things that are already there. In the 50s, Harry Markowitz came up with the so-called mean variance approach. And with this mean variance approach, he introduced science into the choice of portfolios. Nowadays, you can have mathematics as complicated as you want it, but practitioners still use one-period models or variations of the Markowitz algorithm. I would like to convince you a bit that continuous time models really pay out with elegant solutions that are interpretable, but of course, you need more complicated tools for that. And I thank Paresh Date for claiming that you must have much more education in financial mathematics. So let me start in continuous time. I'm looking at a market, a Black-Scholes type market, where I have a money market account where you get an interest rate of R, and a stock, which is log normally distributed, that has a relative risk premium of lambda and a volatility of sigma. In that simple market, I would like to solve the following problem. I would like to find a portfolio process, i.e. the fraction of wealth at each time invested in the stock that maximizes the expected utility from my final wealth hold at time t. And of course, I should introduce that also. My wealth evolves in the following way. It's given by this equation, which means that the relative increase or change in wealth dx over x is just proportional to the change in money invested in a money market account and invested in the stock. A utility function measures my well-being, and I give you some examples of that on the next slide. So the logarithmic utility function or the power utility function, they both care for the fact that I prefer return, safe return to risky return. And you also see the advantage of continuous time finance. It's the solution. The optimal constant fraction of the wealth invested in the stock, or the optimal fraction, is a constant. It's the risk premium divided by the weighted instantaneous variance. Always keep 60% of your wealth in the stock.
What is this?
And the remaining 40% in the bond. Another thing, exponential utility. You should keep a constant amount of money in the stock and, of course, adjust your money market account. And it's clear that the log and power utility stuff here is much more suited for financial applications, while exponential utility is better suited for insurance premium calculations. So that far, no crisis, nothing happened. Now the crisis comes into the game. What I would use is so-called crash modeling and the worst case approach. There are two ingredients to that. The first one is by Hua and Wilmot in '97. We don't know the number and size of crashes. We have no probabilistic assumptions on height, number, and time, but we assume that number and size of crashes until a given time horizon, until the end of the year, are bounded. That is the only assumption. The second assumption is we can't, as we don't have full probabilistic information, we can't solve the optimal portfolio problem completely. What we can only do is we can derive worst case bounds for optimal investment. And I will use those two assumptions to come up with an interesting approach and solution. So with regard to my model, this simply means in normal times, I have a Black-Scholes model. But at the time of the crash, the stock price falls by a fraction k, of which I only know it's between 0 and an upper bound k star. And I don't even know when it will fall. But at that time, it's clear if I have invested money in the money market account and in the stock, then at the crash time, only that part is affected. So at the crash time, I'm losing a fraction of k times pi of t, my portfolio process, the money that is invested in the stock. Yeah, what to do with that? Now, first of all, here's my new type of problem. Before I wanted to find the best possible investment strategy. Now, as I don't know what crash happens and when it happens, I'm trying to make the worst case as good as possible. And the worst case is inside my infimum here. Nature plays a game against me, and nature or the market always wants to make it as bad for me as possible. So I have to be prepared against that, and I'm trying to make the worst case as good as possible. Now let me show in two examples what this actually means. Here's my first extreme strategy. There is something happening, maybe, and I'm afraid, so I'm playing safe. I will not invest any dollar, euro, or whatever into the stock. Now, what's the worst case for me then? Now, why am I playing safe? I'm playing safe because I'm afraid of the crash. Now, the worst thing for me is if no crash happens at all, because then I'm always afraid of investing, and I keep, until the end, I keep my money in the safe money market account, so I will never benefit from stock investment. Now, the second idea is, why caring about a crash? It will not happen anyway, so I ignore it. I just take the optimal investment in the crash-free world. But what then is my worst case? Now, my worst case is if a crash of maximum size, maximum height k star hits me. And even then, as this is also the optimal strategy in the crash-free world, I will not even change. And I've got two formulas. And if I compare them, then there are two things that I can say. It depends on the time horizon. If it's long time, the second one is better. If it's short time, the first one is better. And the first strategy is too conservative to be good if no crash appears. Therefore, that's the worst case scenario. The second one is too risky if a high crash appears, because therefore I get this negative return here. And it's clear that if there is any kind of optimal strategy, it should balance this out. It should increase the risk here so that I get more, even in the worst case. And I should decrease here the risk so that I don't lose that much. And maybe those two meet in the middle. But hey, an optimal strategy cannot be a constant one here. And I give you a theorem on my next slide. And that theorem says the optimal portfolio process is given as a solution to an ordinary differential equation. And even more, I'm indifferent now if I follow this strategy between the worst crash happening at any time or not happening at all. So the crisis does not hit me by surprise. On the other hand, if it doesn't come, that's no point for me anyway also. Okay, here are pictures. If a crash size of at most 20% can happen, then initially I stay on my black line, and with ongoing time, I reduce and reduce my stock investment. If it hasn't happened here, I will go down to 0 at the end. If it has happened here, I know no more crash can come, and I'm switching over to the optimal strategy in the crash-free setting. Of course, if time increases, if I still got 10 years to go, then a crash, an early crash, will be compensated by the long time that I know I can live without the crash. And I can generalize that. If I have n crashes, then I simply get a kind of backward induction, a backward system of differential equations, and I don't want to state that. I only want to give you the picture, and the picture looks like that. If at most 3 crashes can happen, 10 years to go, I start on the green line. Then the crash happens, I go to the red line. No crash, no crash, no crash. Then maybe here a crash happens. I go to the blue line because with every crash gone, my situation becomes better. And finally, I might be here and I switch over with the last crash to here, or I go to the 0 until here. So that is the part that I have. I don't have a single constant portfolio. I have a series of portfolios that I can use one after the other with every crash that I have experienced. Okay, there are a lot of generalizations: stochastic interest rates, non-hedgeable risks, robust interest rates, robust worst case, consumption and investment. This is what we will deal with, multi-asset and other things. So let's come possibly to the main part here, which is optimal lifetime consumption in the face of a crash. I have my same model: money market account, stock. Now my point is, I would like to find a pair of portfolio and consumption process. Pi star tells the amount of, or the fraction of wealth that I invest in the stock, while this here tells me about the speed of my consumption. It's the change of my consumption in an infinitesimal time amount, and it's proportional to the wealth. I'm consuming at a speed which is 5% of my current wealth, and that has to be multiplied with dt. Now, I want to find a strategy that maximizes lifetime consumption. And now you might say, come on, don't you believe in this plus infinity stuff here? And of course not, but this problem is equivalent to a problem with a random time horizon, where the time horizon is independent of the stock prices, and indeed it is, so it's an exponential distribution. So this is even relevant for a random time horizon. The advantage of that model is, again, that we have a closed form solution. And closed form solutions are always good because you can learn from them. And here I give them, and there is a lot, but we only need here the portfolio process, which is the same as before. And here we have the consumption part, which again is a constant. So both strategies in the crash-free world follow constant processes. Now, a constant portfolio process does not mean that you don't have to rebalance your holdings. In fact, you have to rebalance at every time instant, because stock price and money market price, they evolve in different ways. The same for the consumption. The consumption is relative to your wealth, and your wealth changes all the time. So structurally, very nice. Of course, a little bit hard to transform one by one into application, but it's easy to approximate it by locally constant strategies. So this is our basis. Now, how about the crash? Same problem as before. We experience a loss at the crash time, and in fact of maximizing the expected utility, we now maximize the worst case by including this infimum here. And again, it's clear we have to distinguish between the part before the crash and the part after the crash. But typically we ignore that and write pi comma c. So in now solving this problem, I would like to analyze this a bit more. As said, after the crash, after the crisis, we're in the Merton setting. We have this strategy, and we know also what is the optimal utility that we get from following the strategy. So what we can do is, we have a new formulation that we have the change to the Merton strategy after the crash. And this means our problem looks like that. After the crash, we get this. And up to the crash, this is what we now have to calculate, the C and the pi. These are the strategies before the crash or before the crisis. This is what we have to determine to maximize our utility. The idea is again to look at indifferent strategies, and indifferent strategies in probabilistic terms are characterized by the fact that this thing here, which is uncertain and which evolves over time, that this is a martingale. So the expectation is constant, and even if the market chooses the stopping time here, we're not scared about that because the market cannot turn this for us fair game. So it's the optimal fair game after maximization. The market cannot turn this into an unfair game. So if we solve that, of course, we again get a theorem, and I will present that. I will not go further into the technical analysis of that, but I will tell the following. We can show, and that's the surprising thing, there are infinitely many indifferent strategies. Now in my portfolio problem, I always had one, and that was easy to find to solve an ordinary differential equation. And now the question is, first of all, how to find the best indifferent strategy, and on top of that, is the best indifferent strategy worst case optimal? And we were optimistic, but we were a bit surprised by those infinitely many indifferent strategies, but we could figure out the best one and could even prove that it's worst case optimal. Before I'm saying a bit about that, let me show you a picture. So these are my parameters, and they are just numbers. Don't think too much about them. But look at the Merton solution, the solution in the world without a crash. It says, optimally invest 44% of your money in the stock and consume at a speed or at a rate of 8.4% times your current wealth. Now on that blue line lie all indifferent strategies. And I can even show that these are the only ones. Now, what is the best one? Well, if I'm saying I would like to consume with a speed of 10%, then my optimal portfolio holding would maybe be 22% in the stock. If I would say I would like to consume in an optimal way as if there is no crash at all, 8.4%, this is closely to that. So that's maybe 18.4 or 18.5% of the money invested in the stock. Or I would say, I would like to invest as low as possible in the stock, which is maybe here, maybe close, just above 18% in the stock of my wealth, and then I get 8.1% consumption rate. So the task is to figure out the optimal solution here. And here's the answer. I have two ideas. My first idea is I was intrigued by that picture here. And why was I intrigued by that? Now, indifferent strategies say, we don't care if we experience the worst crash now or no crash at all. Now, at the time of now, all strategies have the same wealth. It's small x. And if at that time the worst crash happens, then the strategy where I've invested the worst into the stock is obviously the best one, because after the crash, they all coincide, and that strategy has lost the fewest amount of money. So that was my first idea, find the indifferent strategy that causes the smallest loss if an immediate crash happens. Easy to show that it's optimal, but hard to compute. And so my co-authors, Frank Seifried and Sacha Demetre, they said, why not assume that no crash happens at all? And we find the best strategy that still is an indifferent strategy in that case. And that was computationally tractable. And this is our result. Now, what to say about the result? First of all, the optimal portfolio before the crash is still a constant, and the optimal consumption before the crash is still a constant. Before you think too much about that, I'm going to the next slide and I give you a short version of theorem 2, because this is now nicely to interpret. First of all, the investor always follows a smaller portfolio process before the crash than the Merton portfolio, which is optimal after the crash. So we are more cautious with respect to stock investment. Second, it depends on the investor's character, i.e. on the gamma. So if the gamma is smaller than 1, then this here, this is smaller than 1 also, then we get a 1 over that, then the guy consumes more as long as times are good for gamma smaller than 1. If gamma is larger than 1, then the investor makes extra savings for the bad time. And if gamma is 1, then it's the log investor, then the guy doesn't care at all. So let's come to the conclusion. So everyone tries to protect from a crash via increasing the safe investment if a crisis is in view. Depending on the character, the risk aversion of the people, they concentrate on the now or on the future after a possible crash. Is this good? Well, economically, this is very reasonable, because if all would decide in the same direction, then either we would have no consumption at all or very few consumption and the crisis would come. If they would all spend the money now, then the crisis would hit them so hard that the times afterwards would be extremely bad for the economy. Now, how about applying those results? I think what can be done is payment plans can be constructed, pension plans that care for a possible future crisis and that can be tailored to the character of the individual customer. And with that, I would like to finish my talk and thank you all for the attention. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Professor Kohn. There is we have time for a few questions. There is a question by Dr. Jayan Kumar in chat.
Okay, so the question, I can read that. My question is to boost consumption when income of individuals continuously reducing income due to growing unemployment and beyond the time inability. I think this is a macroeconomic question, not so much related to my thing, because I only have one small investor. What we currently have in Germany is that during the crisis, we have a reduction of the value added tax, because the politics say, okay, we try to boost the consumption, and by that we try to boost the demand, which means that the companies maybe are compensated now with more consumption than during the time of the lockdown that we had on others. And I guess that is pretty much into that idea. So we had a state that was very defensive with investment in the last 5 or 6 years, and maybe they were actually saving for the bad times. But it would be, I would say, overemphasizing to say that they were seeing that. So I think they were just lucky about that.
Thank you. So any further questions to Professor Kohn? We do seem to have another minute or two. If not, then probably Dr. Chatterjee, do we move to panel discussion?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The forum is open for the discussion, and I request you to please lead the discussion.
Okay, thank you. So already there is a question in the chat on today's topic to all the panelists. So the question is the idea of making SMEs open interest bearing strategic reserve accounts solely with banks during normal times a compulsory practice in lieu of some tax benefits on same, so that such reserve funds can help them sustain during economic crisis. Is that a viable and practical solution? Perhaps Anindya, and if Dr. Ankur Sinha is there, they might be uh, better people being based in India to answer that. Is Dr.
Yes,
Anindya
Anita, would you like
Chakrabarti
to
there?
take this up since it's more of a...
Yeah, I'm still trying to understand the meaning of the question.
Neil, perhaps you would like to elaborate exactly what the question is about.
Can I respond to that question if it's allowed?
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Could you please elaborate on the question a bit, please? We are not able to hear you. You're on mute. Neil, you are on mute.
Chirag, do you want to answer as far as, I mean, that might also help us clarify what the question is on.
Yeah, if you allow, I can, if I can understand what he's trying to say. If I've understood the question correctly. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes.
So the question, I think, which is trying to say that why don't the banks create some sort of a reserve account for SMEs in the normal time, and that can be utilized for lending to them during the maybe during the worst time scenarios or any time. So if that is the question, I would like to respond that Neil, some of the countries, they have a special banks which is only catering to SMEs, not only the reserve part, but only catering to SMEs. Their main objective is to fund SMEs. And at the same time, I think it's a good idea to have this type of reserves for SMEs because they require a lot of funding. They have a lot of funding problem, as I could visualize, and if they can create reserve account for them. But the problem here is the bankers face is that some of the SMEs are very risky to lend. And you also, I think somebody was asking earlier, even if it's a risk-based funding, but still SMEs don't keep some of the collaterals, which is the valuations are pretty low, or maybe some of the collaterals which is absolutely illiquid. So even if you create a reserves like this, but still the lending from the banking perspective in crisis situation will be difficult because they may not be able to take the risk. And that's the biggest challenge, or that's the biggest de-link between government policies and bank funding, because the bank manager or the bank CEOs doesn't want to take the risk for that perspective. So maybe a good thing is that some banks are created only to fund this type of companies. And I know many countries, they have a special type of bank which funds only SMEs. Their objective function is only on SMEs. Could I answer your question?
Asking
Hello?
because when times are different, banks don't lend money. Nobody lend, even here, even in UAE, nobody lends money. So the idea is you keep the money, create a strategic reserve account in bank, every company, small, medium scale. So right now what happens is PBT is shown only in the books. If you ask them whether you have the money, they don't. They withdraw it. So the idea is if you can make it compulsory, I was reading it in a forum that if you force companies to create strategic reserve accounts whatever, 50,000, 1 lakh every year from business and keep it, then it is their money which the bank allows them to withdraw with the interest. Bank is not giving loan. We are not talking about loan or special banks. Instead of showing strategic reserve on the books of account, you make them physically create those reserves, 10-15% of their PBT against tax exemption into bank account. That was my point. Thank you.
So he was basically saying the concept of like a cash reserve from the banks to central bank sort of thing.
I also see a bit of implementation difficulties with this kind of an idea, because you cannot force an SME to necessarily keep a bit of their profits, a bit of the money aside every year, because they will always be curious to use that money for growth purposes, right? So how large should this fund be? That should be asked to the SMEs to keep money aside. It's very hard to make a decision, and after all, it's somebody else's money, right? So there are some implementation difficulties with this kind of an approach. That is what I personally feel.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt. I would like to add that our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Parimal Vyas, has also joined the panel discussion. So welcome once more. And we would like to have your remarks as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Professor Vyas.
Yeah. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
I think Professor Dhanesh, let the panel discussion start. I would join in between because some other activities also, incidentally, it is in progress. So I just wanted to say that yes, wonderful webinar is in progress and a lot of inputs. I think it is of a very diverse kind of discussion which is going on, and certainly I would join probably to share some of my thoughts maybe at the end. So Dhanesh, you can go ahead.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, please.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So we have a very specific question from a student, Amashi. How can we rebuild global gallery and art market after the crisis? I mean, this is way beyond my expertise. Would anybody on the panel like to comment? So global arts and gallery market.
I think it's a very specific question. This is not the challenge. So currently it's not just the global gallery and the art market is facing a challenge. No matter what industry you look at, be it accommodation, be it food and food services, be it entertainment, almost everybody is struggling, and almost everybody is kind of thinking that how to improve the consumer confidence, how to build up the demand once the crisis is over, because what people are saying is that this whole thing is going to last for quite some time. So the questions that we are asking is that what fundamental changes need to happen in some of the businesses, the way we have been operating, the way we have been running. There are a lot of questions that people are asking, so things are not just. Hello? Am I audible?
Hello there. I mean, if those who are not asking questions, it will be very useful if you could mute your mic. So, Professor Sinha, you can continue. There was some disturbance.
Yeah, quite a bit of noise. So there are a lot of such things most of us are struggling with. And what all changes we need to bring in the fundamental way, the way the businesses have been running and the way we have been operating. I think it's very hard for me to answer this question specific to global gallery and the art market, but if at all it was a general question, we could have taken it up uh, a bit.
We can make it slightly general, just starting from that point. The art galleries question is in some ways related to spending which is purely disposable or discretionary spending. Nobody goes to art galleries because they are very hungry, right? So discretionary spending is going to be disproportionately affected. and is probably going to be affected in a kind of lagged manner. It will remain affected probably sometime after the crisis has passed, because people would still be in shock and so on. So would you like to comment on just on discretionary spending and providers who depend on discretionary spending specifically, which could be art galleries, which could be jewelers, on how they should recover or what they should do? Yourself or Dr. Chirag?
Can I respond?
Yeah,
Yes,
please go
please.
ahead.
I am Jayant Kumar. So, sir, this is not about art gallery only. This is also about film theaters. This is about construction industry. This is about all location-based industry, wherever they are. And they are severely affected. Tourism industry, for example. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, please go ahead.
Tourism industry, for that matter. Sir, all these industries are at the brink of a collapse, which where revival needs government and public support. Without that support, it cannot come. So far as discretion-based spending is concerned, for example, theaters. Only thing is that you should have some kind of innovation. For example, recently, I will give you an example. Recently, a film was launched in Amazon. The
Yeah.
film Gulabo Sitabo. The film was launched in Amazon and other channels online because film theaters are not working. So you will have to have some innovative ways by which you can perceive your business and then go ahead. Finally, sir,
Yeah.
going through this webinar, there are four very important points which have come up, uh, where these 4 points have been emphasized by almost every speaker. That is, one is innovation, another is entrepreneurship, another is opportunities, and diversification. These 4 points are the basic outcome of this webinar, followed by how individual and macro-based consumption spending can be increased. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. So there are a couple of other questions in chat. What kind of measures government should adopt to deal with problem of unorganized sectors unemployment? So in India, 90% people work in unorganized sectors. Who would want to come on that? So any of the India experts? Professor Sina?
Yeah, well, what I believe is that during this migrant crisis, what we have seen is that a lot of migrant workers have returned back to their native towns. And I was looking at one of the survey reports, and what I observed was that around 25% of these people are actually planning to stay back at their homes. So maybe 75% of them might return back to the cities and all, take up a job. I'm sure the kind of salaries and stuff that we have been offering to these laborers might change. Maybe it might go up in order to attract them or bring them back to the cities. But as of now, the survey shows that around 25% of the people are kind of looking to stay back in the villages. So on the part of the government, what I think is we have to create opportunities. It's a good chance to diversify things, go beyond the urban side, look at the rural side as well, because there we have people who are ready to take up new work, new opportunities. So if at all we can develop them as more like micro entrepreneurs, where they can do something on the agriculture side, or maybe they can do something which might help the other sectors. Of course, the online presence of some of these people is also increasing, which is again an opportunity that I see. And of course, we need to improve the supply chain as well, because the supply chain on the rural side is extremely poor. So when it comes to bringing the stuff from the rural market to the urban market, or when it comes to taking stuff from the urban market to the rural market, things are still a bit challenging in our country. So there are a lot of improvements that are required. So the question is more on what kind of measures the government should adopt while dealing with problems that the urban unorganized sector employment in India is facing. But then, as you could see, I mean, though it's not clear in the question that what kind of a measure you're talking about, if I could just have a conversation with the person who has posed the question, maybe I'll be able to better answer your question. Can I talk to you, Ravi?
Can I supplement Dr.
Yes,
Sinha?
yes, yes.
Yeah, it's very interesting today. Maybe Government of India has come out with additional support in the form of a welcome relief for migrant workers, and I'm very happy to share with you. I would draw the attention of the editorial page of the Economic Times of today itself. This is just, because we are talking about support to them, and under the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act schemes, Government of India has decided to allocate additional 40,000 crores. They are going to get work for another 125 days. Now, this is again a very, very, very welcome move to support to what Professor Sinha has said, is that see, it is a double-edged sword. Number one, we do not, if they want to come back to the urban areas, yes, we are facing labor shortage. Yes, they are most welcome. But we, Government of India, is now this time is very clear. They really do not want to provide incentive, for them to come back to the urban centers or cities. And for that, in fact, the attendee can certainly see. But as of now, Government of India has decided that we would assure them employment under this Manrega scheme for another 125 days. I believe, because now it's a very, very important question on which we are discussing. We will have to wait and watch, because it's a big challenge to create an opportunity for them. So we'll have to identify the right kind of projects and put them. And again, I would like to reiterate that one of the important challenge that the country as a whole is facing is infrastructure. How do we build infrastructure? Now, the challenge before all the state governments, including the biggest one where the migration has happened, is the Uttar Pradesh. They really need to have, a plan where it is not just offering them employment, but utilizing these human resources in the right kind of infrastructural work, which would serve as a support, in near future. Because again, there is a positive news today relating to today's webinar, and I think if you look at the demand scenario would become clear by month of September. Now we are in the month of June, maybe another 3-4 months, as I said in my opening remarks. By September, it appears that we talk about the circulation of money. Liquidity is a major big issue. Again, still debate is going on that how much money we should transfer. Actual cash should be transferred into their hands. Now that is also, I think, one factor which we really need to consider. But I believe Government of India is keeping a very close watch on what is happening. I think I have never seen these kind of responses coming out in form of policy announcement and execution in the past. So Government of India, I believe, is very, very sensitive, and Honorable Prime Minister, I think, as you have heard him several times, for him, a common man, a poor individual who earns his livelihood on a day-to-day basis, I believe he for the first time, not to criticize the earlier governments, but I think the government is very, very sensitive for the first time to address this group, this sector, and I believe it would bring positive results to us.
Sir,
Thank
may I
you,
intervene?
yeah.
This is Professor Ketan Upadhyay.
Yeah.
Sir, in continuation, I would like to bring out that Dr. Chiragra brought one important issue, that is capital migration. But I would like to ask Dr. Chiragra that in short run, would it be possible for capital to migrate to cheap labor? Please react.
That's a very good question you have asked. I think in short run, capital migration can happen if you have a viable projects looking into it. So I would like to take a one step, like Professor Sinha also touched upon it, that it is not only job creation which is required in rural area, but in rural areas also there are a lot of entrepreneurship skills which is there, which people want to develop in a big way. So the capital migration can definitely happen in a short run, and that's why I was starting to talk about in my presentation about the source of funding, and one of these things is the crowdfunding. If the products which is feasible, if it's there in the rural areas also, a crowdfunding can possibly go there and fund that type of projects. So to answer your question, yes, it is possible.
Yeah. I think, but government policy also should go in sync with them, because capital migration is a big issue.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, thank you. It's a very nice point.
But the thing is that if you have
Professor Ketan, there is another interesting effort which has been put in, which I would like to just supplement, is that the attempt has been made by almost all states to document the skills inventory of these people who have moved to those respective states. I think that is also very, very important to supplement, because if you provide financial support or capital, that is fine, but you really need to also know that where and how we can utilize these human resources for what kind of jobs. So at least I am aware of the efforts have been made by the Honorable Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh. That is what probably is the information I have as far as because I agree with Professor Chakravarti. Creating a job is not the only objective, but you have to see that we utilize them in the right direction with the kind of skills set which they have. And certain states have started creating skills inventory in a very systematic way by using the various modes of establishment which they have in the state itself. Efforts are on.
Yes, sir. I think skill development and skill mapping is a very important thing.
Precisely.
Thank you. There is one earlier question by Shali Agarwal. There are many sectors directly dependent on foreign trade, and Atmanirbhar means producing them in India itself. But so this is really linked to the discussion we just had. Due to migration of labor and lack of other resources, this is a long procedure, hence pushing back the economy to a major extent. So how can this be dealt? Professor Sinha wants to come in on that.
Yeah, I mean, of course, one of the things is that you want to bring the laborers back. The second thing is that you want to reduce your dependency on the laborers. So a lot of automation and stuff of that sort has to come into your business. So there are multiple things that have to change. So as I said in the beginning, that fundamental changes are required over here, and only then the businesses can move forward, because whatever we are going to see after the COVID-19 crisis is over, people are talking about new normal and stuff, and that's what I see, that a lot of things, the way businesses are run, the way we do our daily tasks, a lot of things are going to change. So a lot of automation, technology and stuff of that sort has to enter into businesses. You want to pull the laborers back to your organization. Maybe you have to offer them better salaries and stuff like that. So these are the changes that I'm able to envision. Of course, it's very hard to make comment as in what is going to happen, because we haven't seen these kind of uncertain times in the past. So there is a big amount of uncertainty that we are facing in the future.
Yeah, so there is a related question. How can we remove the foreign dependency in the short run? I suppose we can't suddenly start making things which we were not making as of yesterday. So, I mean, I don't know if anybody else on
Things
the
will
panel.
definitely take time. Dependency on the foreign trade and stuff of that sort requires some policy interventions from the government.
Yes.
That is something is not going to happen immediately. This will need some time, right?
Yeah.
But I think as of now, we have to address the immediate challenges.
Yeah, yeah.
The immediate challenges are how to get the businesses started.
But my point is also there, sorry to come in between, but do you want to remove the foreign dependency? Because I think it's a mixed model, or it should be a mixed model.
That's right.
It is not possible to remove foreign dependency because we require integrations within the economies, different economies. It is, as I said in my presentation, it's a mild model of Atmanirbhar. It should be self-sufficient to some extent for the crisis period and all, but you should not depend. You should not produce something which is costly in your own country but is very cheap in other country. Why should you do that? We should go back to our Ricardo's theory. Why should you do that? You develop which is available, which is efficiently done in our country, and which is not, you import that. Do a cost-benefit analysis.
And if at all you are dropping, if you are stopping foreign trade and stuff like that, then your internal businesses are going to become less innovative. The competition is going to reduce, and you don't really want it to happen, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So only businesses know that, okay, in other countries people are making it for a cheaper price. They will be looking for alternative solutions so that they can also reduce the cost significantly. They can do the production in innovative manner and all. So some sort of a mixed model, as the other panelist is talking about, is what we should envision rather than talking about becoming entirely Atmanirbhar.
Can I just add one or two lines?
Please go.
Yes, sir.
No, it is very nice of listening to both of you. We should not really. I think there is some confusion which has been created by the term itself. People, they don't understand, and we are not talking about be Indian and buy Indian. But then I think it's very important that even I say that import is not a dirty word, but then we should not put all eggs into one basket. That's what I would say. You should not have over dependence. And secondly, I would always welcome, we should import if required, if it is not available. And we should be able to create and strengthen export, by importing certain components or kind of a raw material. At the same time, probably in a long run, we must know how to make smart use of technology. It is not like protectionism versus nationalism that some people are talking about. It won't make economic sense because I'll tell you, technology and economic laws, they operate ruthlessly. It has nothing to do with patriotism and nationalism. So I think we'll have to understand that I think I fully agree with Professor Ankur Sinha that we are heading towards kind of a hybrid model and over dependence. I think we had seen the days of screwdriver technology. But I believe we must learn how to make smart use of technology in certain sectors and how to reduce dependence on technology in certain sectors. I think right kind of a mix with the sector between the automation and the labor intensiveness and the right kind of approach in our foreign trade outlook. I think that is also very, very interesting. Otherwise, today it is with one country, probably tomorrow it may be a group of countries. We really do not know what kind of situation we are going to face in near future. But that also we really seriously need to take into consideration before just concluding that no. And I think before I close, last one thing which all of us should remember, that we should put all out efforts to strengthen Make in India campaign. I think that is also equally important.
Sir, I would like to add,
Yeah.
Professor Sinha and Professor Parimal Vyas, sir, that sir, Atmanirbhar concept is like the concept of saving. If individually you save, it is very good for you. But if the society saves more, then they will consume less. Similarly, here also, sir, if we talk about Atmanirbhar, that is very good for us. But suppose that all countries are talking about Atmanirbhar, what will happen? So, is a kind of you will have to develop a cross model. To what extent we want to have Atmanirbhar? It is very true. Professor Vyas and Professor Ankur Sinha has put it in very fine way. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Can I request Professor Vyas to give his concluding remarks for this webinar?
Yeah, I think let me place on record. It was a wonderful discussion. I think in between, it is the professional hazard. I could not listen to one or two speaker, but uh, galaxy of resource persons. Again my compliments and congratulations to Professor Danesh Patel and Professor Ketan Upadhyay and his entire team. I believe the whole objective of this webinar was to create a kind of a deliberations on uh, various facets of Indian economy and the global economy. What I would, in fact, what I would suggest that a time has come. All those attendees who are from within this country, I would request all of you, please, start conducting small surveys and please start conducting impact studies. This is very much required. In fact, University Grants Commission New Delhi and the Indian Council of Social Science and Research, see, first of all, we really need to understand and we really need to develop awareness. This is very very important, and I think we will have to extend this among our students and the research scholars. Now, this is what I personally believe we must do. Whatever understanding that we have, it is good. But then, can we make small case studies, taking different sectors? Somebody, I think, very correctly talked about the informal sector. Now, this is again, we will have to be very very clear about it. That how we can take care of not just migrant laborers, but we should also take care of these informal sector which has a big role to play in economic activities of our big country. So what I would suggest is that there cannot be one final solution, or there is not one final strategy that or recommendation that we can evolve from out of these kind of webinar. But uh, we already have different kind of business models operating in India, and we will have to see to it that how industry as a whole and taking sectoral approach, how can we take care of the various sectoral issues that we are facing, and as a Professor Ankur Sinha very correctly said, he in fact advocated hybrid model. I think that is the need of the hour. Probably the country, before competing at the global level, uh, we are not sure about the challenges that we are going to face. Some of the challenges, they become evident as of now, but I think there are many newer challenges. If I can see, if I can give you one example of an education sector, higher education, I think I'm very happy if I can design an online course and put it at the national level. I can have students enrollment at the national level. This first thing which is going to happen is that now we are going to break the boundaries of higher education. We never thought before COVID that we would be able to reach out to such a wide and heterogeneous spectrum of intellectuals. This was what, I think it was a distant dream, but technology has made it feasible. So likewise, maybe this is just one example which I thought I should share with you. The rules of the game, as Professor Sinha also very correctly said, that we know some of the challenges, we are not aware of some of the challenges that we are going to face. Another challenge that I can see as an educationist is that why are you talking about only companies to come into India? I would say that, are we doing any talent mapping and the preparedness on the side of the Indian higher education sector? Because there are certain countries, from where the young people would like to come and, carry out their academics and research in this country. How are we prepared? How are we going to take care of those challenges in terms of talent mapping or even talent hunting? I think that is also very very important. So there are several issues probably which one can talk about. This I think this webinar, it was of a very generic nature, but I think we should sit, all of us, we should sit together and we should talk care about, maybe like today Professor Dhanesh said that, how businesses can how can we lead businesses under COVID-19. I think we should take up sectoral wise, and I think that is where the team of Department of Business Economics can think of some sectoral, webinars where you can bring in those experts. I think there are some questions I could see it has come, and we can bring the group of experts again in those kind of webinars. I think this is a continuous process. But on behalf of the Maharaja Sahaj University of Baroda, I would not be able to again read out the names, but all those from the different parts of the world and experts from IIM, all of them, some CEO like Chakrabarti ji and Dante ji and all of you who have joined here. I think on behalf of the university, I was reading yesterday the Times of India, where I think now India is expecting some cyber attacks. This can happen. It is not that we will fight only. We'll see the fight which will take place only on the borders. This kind of fight we should be prepared for. And at that point of time, our agility, our awareness, our preparedness, our commitment, I think will make hell of a difference. It's a continuous process, and I would say that. We should not forget the rule that we always talk about is the survival of the fittest. It is not now survival, revival. Now I think we have to move towards the growth and excellence. How can we do that? I believe it's an important question. And such webinars brings people who have a lot of understanding about it. We can create a set of recommendations, and I think it should be an ongoing process. So I believe let us not look for a very one very final answer or one final strategy for this. It is a group of strategies, and then what will work in one sector, it may not work in the other sector, because we will have to work out the strategy. Our country is so diverse. We need to take care of small scale industries. We need to take care of cottage industries. We need to take care of micro and small medium enterprises. And again, there are certain industries probably where I think we use the technology, which probably the whole world, the kind of impact that we have made in Silicon Valley. So I think we should not underestimate our potential also. But then at the same time, we have to more worry about the challenges. And I think we should look for ways for handling those challenges. I always believe if COVID-19 is a challenge, it is not a challenge for me. It is more of an opportunity for all of us. Now it depends on us as a country as a whole. Can we convert this challenge into an opportunity? Not 2022, fine, not enough. 2025, if not 2025, 2030. This country, I think, to which we belong, I'm very happy, because when I was a student of economics, all my teachers, they said India is a developing country. I'm very happy today. Probably the world has accepted us as the third big power after America and China. But I think we should not underestimate China, their strength, their commitment, their patriotism, their creativity, and we know ourselves also better. So I think it requires a lot of commitment on our side. But I'm sure, with a positive optimist note, I'm sure we have always created a history, and India would do it again. Nothing new for us, but then that requires the support, collective brotherhoodness, and I'll tell you, for us, the entire world is a family. We should not forget that. And we have to see to it that we as Indians, with such a heterogeneity and with the diversity, we have to see to it that how, if we are strong, how can we make others strong? First, in our own family, then in our own state, then in our own country, and then in the whole world. I think that is what that is how I look at this challenge, and I think on the path or the roadmap that we have to travel in near future. Once again, we appreciate the support of all of you, because time is the most valuable resource that we are not ready to share with. You all have spent your time and you shared your expertise. And I think it has really helped the Maharaja Sahaj University of Baroda to walk one line further. I think we also believe in contributing in the nation building. And I think the purpose of this webinar is to create an opportunity for all those people who are taking interest into this issues which are influencing lives of each and every one of us on a day-to-day basis. I think this webinar go a long way in long-term memory of all the attendees who are with us, and we all should congratulate collectively once again all the resource persons, all the experts who have joined, and Professor Danesh Patel in particular, the director of OIA, and Professor Ketan Upadhyay, the Dean Faculty of Commerce, where I think they became instrumental in creating an opportunity for all of us to spend time and learn something from each other to see to it that we can make the world better place to live in near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Vyas. Thank you, Danesh Patel, for Professor Patel to invite me. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Vyas, for your remarks, and we assure you that taking cue from that, we'll work upon it. And thank you all the panelists. I now request Mr. K.R. Badola from the Department of Business Economics to propose the vote of thanks.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Dr. Suvanna, am I connected?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
I'm audible to all the members.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. At the outset, indeed, it's a matter of great pleasure and proud that under the aegis of our Honorable Chancellor, Rajmata Wangini Raje Gaikwad, who had blessed this particular international webinar, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Parimal Vyas, who has really helped and contributed as an academician, as an administrator in bringing this reality. I begin in a very precise manner. Professor Vyas, who began with the quote, "Education can bring solution to any problem," and really it is a fact. Now, when it comes to the certain issues, I would also like to point out that today I have started believing that Corona is a global phenomenon, which is, of course, with the challenges, but there are the solutions where the nations have started working on that. Professor Vyas, thank you very much for raising the issues of the public expenditure, public health, and the efforts put by the government as far as the sustainability and organizational fronts are concerned. My thanks are due to all the speakers, but before that, I would like to acknowledge the Director, OIA, Office of International Affairs, Professor Danesh Patel, Professor K.R. Upadhyay, Dean Faculty of Commerce, the Head of the Department, Business Economics, Dr. Jayant Kumar, who have taken a real pain in inviting, as the Professor Parimal Vyas said, the galaxy of the resource person to this international webinar to the benefit of many attendees and the department. To begin with, Professor Chiraga Chakravarti, with his contextual remarks, it was really good to know about that what Atmanirbhar meant, particularly when it comes to the opportunities with the deeper effects, with the bigger opportunities. And he rightly pointed out that well-defined government policies are going to matter, and more enhancing factor that capital movement. Thank you, sir. As far Dr. Korane is concerned, he has focused on entrepreneurship science and the purpose of company and economic crisis. Sir, your views were really an earmark as far as the persuading the people, the customer, the basic mantra for the success is concerned. Sir, you highlighted about the opportunities, the commonness and diversity with the global resources. Definitely. As regards Professor Paresh, that is concerned, sir, in the technical times when we are talking about the risky business and particularly minding the business operation purpose through this economic crisis, the well-defined way of risk through the different kind of the approaches and VAR that has made us to learn that what kind of risk can be taken in the short period of time. Professor Rolf Kohn, he made the session quite technical but interesting to give us the different kind of the crash, right from 1 to 8th crash he has explained and presented the investment strategies in this particular time of the leading your business through economic crisis. Well, On behalf of all, I extend thanks to Professor Ankur Sinha, who had been one of the motivating person to raise the fundamental questions on the foreign trade. In the panel discussion, Vice Chancellor Sir again has highlighted the aspect of the rural economy and reaching to the people through the cash, making the people more resourceful in terms of the cash. However, a right kind of infrastructure and rural policies are required. I believe that inter-regional policies are focal point for the government of India today. In the concluding remark, Professor Parimal Vyas, Ketan Upadhyay, all have expressed that here are the days to come, that we see that the corona is not to be seen with the fearness, rather it has to be taken as an opportunity as far as the local domestic economies are concerned. At the end, I appreciate and acknowledge the efforts put by Dr. Sumanna Chatterjee, who has really propelled this particular event of conducting and organizing international webinar in the department. Great success, Dr. Sumanna. On behalf of my department, faculty and colleagues, I extend my vote of thanks to all attendees, technical support, administrative staff, and all the students, those who have helped us. We believe that in future also, with the help of the department, the faculty, university, and again the galaxy of the resource person from the different part of the world, sir, we will be connected with you. Thank you, one and all. Thanks for giving us this opportunity, and good evening and good night from my side. Thank you, sir. Goodbye.
Thank you, sir, very much. Thank you all for being present today and making this international webinar a super success. That's all from us today. Stay safe, stay happy.